Welcome to Sally Fox audiobook. I became a hero because I couldn't quit watching anime crossovers, chapter 26 to 50, The Playful Sukuna. This confidence was not blind, it was built upon absolute strength. In this era, he was the synonym for invincibility, the ceiling for all jujitsu sorcerers. However, TCH, what an arrogant brat. A cold, mocking voice suddenly interrupted the conversation. A mouth split open on Itadori Yuji's cheek. It was Sukuna's mouth. Immediately following, a scarlet eye also opened beneath Itadori's own, rolling around as it fixed its gaze on Gojo Satoru. Hava hava. Even 1,000 years ago, no one dared to be this presumptuous in front of this great master. Sukuna's voice was filled with deep disdain. Are all you jujitsu sorcerers nowadays this ignorant of heaven and earth? When this great master regains freedom, you'll be the first one I kill for entertainment. Facing Sukuna's provocation, Gojo Satoru merely swatted Itadori's face as if shooing a fly. Parasite, quiet down. You? Sukuna was furious. Gojo-sensei, I am not joking. Classmate Luo Wei interrupted this scene of teacher's kindness and student's filial piety. He shook his head, his expression still calm, as if he had long seen through the future script. Your limitless is indeed powerful, but in a real jujitsu battle, it is not unsolvable. Luo Wei held up four fingers and began his tactical review. Firstly, the original Ryomen Sukuna was not in this current human form. He was a demon god with 4 arms and 2 mouths. Do you know what that means? Gojo Satoru's movement paused slightly. It means that while forming hand signs, he could still use 2 hands to attack you, while chanting a curse, his other mouth could breathe to recover cursed energy. Luo Wei's voice was not loud, but every word was crucial, hitting the core logic of a jujitsu battle. Moreover, sensei, you rely too much on the limitless. What if Sukuna activates domain expansion, malevolent shrine? That technique, which can neutralize cursed techniques, means that if he closes the distance for hand-to-hand combat, your limitless will become ineffective. At that point, for hands attacking your 2, combined with that physical strength far surpassing ordinary people. Luo Wei glanced at Gojo Satoru, whose expression was gradually becoming serious, and continued to press the attack. Not to mention Black Flash. If it were him, something like Black Flash could probably be used as a normal attack. Although, given Sukuna's arrogant and sadistic personality, he most likely wouldn't choose such a simple and unadorned fighting style. Saying this, Luo Wei sighed, a hint of disappointment in his eyes regarding the original plot. He would definitely feel that simply killing you with a malevolent shrine is too boring, even somewhat beneath him. What he wants to do is completely shatter your infinity and conceptually negate your status as the strongest. Therefore, he will probably deliberately turn off a malevolent shrine, intentionally take your attack, or even willingly let your unlimited voidie hit him, in order to let a Shikigami capable of adapting to all things, Mahoraga, adapt to your infinity. Luo Wei spread his hands. Under normal circumstances, if he weren't playing around like this and just rushed forward with the malevolent shrine for a 4-armed aura, Gojo-sensei, your margin for error is truly very low. Once dragged into a war of attrition, your brain will be drained first. Gojo Satoru fell silent. This time, he was truly silent. Because every single word Luo Wei spoke was tactically sound. Furthermore, information regarding them 4 arms and 2 faces was vague even in the records within Jujutsu High. How did this newly enrolled student know so clearly? And domain expansion, malevolent shrine, huh? Gojo Satoru stroked his chin thoughtfully. It is indeed a troublesome technique. As for Sukuna on Itadori's face, for once, he refrained from retorting. That scarlet eye stared intently at Luo Wei, its gaze lacking scorn but filled with investigation and killing intent. This brat, why does he know my fighting habits? He even voiced the strategy for adapting to limitless that I hadn't fully settled on yet. It was almost as if he had watched it happen from the sidelines. Interesting. Sukuna sneered inwardly. Although being predicted was annoying, hearing Luo Wei say Gojo Satoru would be beaten to death by a four-armed Ora inexplicably pleased him. However, Luo Wei shifted his tone, and his previously serious expression instantly melted away, replaced by a relaxed smile. While Sensei probably can't beat that old fellow who's cheating and won't admit it in a one-on-one fight, don't forget you still have your student here, me. He patted his chest, brimming with confidence. I am indeed not strong enough right now, but my growth speed is very fast. 4 or 5 days ago, I was just an ordinary person. Now, I can already run around the entire field with saber. By the time the decisive battle arrives, I will become stronger. Stronger than you can imagine. Luo Wei looked at Gojo Satoru, his eyes sincere. At that time, whether it's a righteous group beating or a battle of attrition, as long as we can win, who cares about the method? Don't you agree? A slight breeze blew across the training ground. Gojo Satoru paused for a moment. He looked at the student before him, whose eyes were clear yet whose mouth was spouting treasonous remarks, and suddenly burst into loud laughter. Ha 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 ha! Ha 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 ha! The laughter was hearty, echoing across the empty training ground. Interesting. So interesting. Gojo Satoru laughed so hard he couldn't straighten up. He even reached out to wipe away the tears of laughter from his eyes. To be so frankly underestimated by my own student, and even have tactics laid out for me. I really am a failure as the strongest. But he quickly straightened up, and the smile on his face became incomparably brilliant, a joy stemming from the heart. However, Luo Wei, you are right. Since you've said so, let's settle it then. At that time, we'll go together. Let that 1,000-year-old antique see what a mixed doubles match of modern jujitsu sorcerers looks like. Since the future was full of uncertainty, the solution was to break it. If it was with these interesting students, perhaps a different ending could truly be created. Gojo Satoru reached out and threw an arm around Luo Wei's shoulder, the force nearly making Luo Wei stumble. But before that time arrives. The smile on Gojo Satoru's face suddenly became somewhat kindly menacing. He pointed at the running track beneath their feet, and then pointed at Moki Zenin and Panda who were moving training equipment in the distance. Right now, you are still too weak, classmate Luo Wei. You can't even pass the physical conditioning test, yet you think you can beat up Sukuna. Come on, run 100 laps for me to warm up first. No cheating with magical power, okay? I'll be watching you with my 6 eyes. Ooh? 100 laps? Luo Wei's face instantly fell. Gojo-sensei, abusing students is illegal, right? This is called education through love. Gojo Satoru gave a thumbs up. Classmate Artoria Pendragon can join too. Stamina is very important. Artoria Pendragon, who had been preparing to watch the show from the side, froze mid-motion, and the ahoge on her head instantly stood up alertly. Me. I have to run too. P.S. In the first part, Gojo was indeed leagues above everyone else, but Sukuna was indeed stronger. PS2, Gojo's contributions in the battle against Sukuna, from highest to lowest, 1. Made Sukuna go into debt, exhausted his reserves, 2. Crippled Megumi's body and weakened his cursed energy output, 3. Tested out most of Sukuna's abilities. Chapter 27, Lottery, and Kazuma's Luck. Seeing Gojo Satoru's unquestionable smile, Loie sighed and resignedly began warming up. Although he complained verbally, he knew clearly in his heart. If he wanted to change the subsequent battles, if he truly wanted to possess the qualification to stand beside the strongest, the sweatshed now was an indispensable price. Let's go, Leah. Yes, master. Under the morning light, 3 figures began running on the track. Gojo Satoru stood in place, watching these vibrant students, the smile on his lips lingering for a long time. 4-armed Sukuna, huh? He murmured softly to himself, lightly caressing his fingertips. If it really comes to that, it might truly be a tough fight. However, I have no intention of losing. The night at Jujitsu High was always exceptionally quiet, only the occasional sound of insects punctuating the mountain forest shrouded by the barrier. Loey lay on the dormitory bed assigned to him, hands behind his head, staring blankly at the ceiling. After a day of intense training, although his body was exhausted, his spirit was unusually energized. That guy Gojo Satoru really doesn't know how to hold back when he hits. Loey rubbed the sore muscles in his thighs. The so-called education of love from that strongest jujitsu sorcerer was practically training people to death. But the effect was also significant. Loey could clearly feel his physical fitness and control over magic power increasing rapidly. However, training alone isn't enough. Loey turned over, his consciousness sinking into the system interface in his mind. At this moment, the golden interface was displaying the current UP Gacha pool. Current UP world, Konosuba, God's blessing on this wonderful world. Current Primo Gems, 1940. Although this amount of Primo Gems was just a drop in the bucket for someone with bad luck, for someone like Loey who possessed the protagonist halos and inherently decent fortune, a temple was enough to create a miracle. Although aquas of resurrection and purification are tempting, considering the possibility of catching her low IQ. Loey stroked his chin and decisively dismissed the idea of wanting aqua. Compared to that, if I could draw Megumin's explosion magic, or Kazuma's luck. Taking a deep breath, Loey pressed the enticingly glowing Prey X10 button. A shooting star streaked across the night sky, starting off with a dazzling burst of golden light. Holy crap! I got something! Immediately after, the golden light dissipated, and 10 icons lined up in sequence. 3-star weapon Rusty Dagger. 3-star item Cabbage. Amidst a pile of meaningless junk, 2 stars shining with different lights appeared particularly dazzling. Purple 4-star skill, Touch of Absorption, from Liquiz. Effect, can absorb the opponent's life force or magic power through contact and convert it into one's own energy. Note, can also transfer magic power in reverse, making it a god-tier skill for replenishing magic. Loey's eyes lit up. Good stuff. This was practically a skill tailor-made for him right now. Whether it was cursed energy or magic power, it could absorb any energy. With this, future endurance or replenishing magic power for Artoria would no longer be a worry. Furthermore, in battle, he could absorb while fighting. It was practically a perpetual motion machine. But that wasn't the main event. Loey's gaze shifted to the golden icon. Gold 5-star passive, Kazuma Super Good Luck, from Soto Kazuma. Effect, elevates the user's luck value to an extremely ridiculous level. Whether it's rock paper scissors, gambling, or picking up money on a night walk, you are a favorite of the goddess of fortune. Note, although luck is very good, various strange troubles might occur, so please be careful to avoid them. Hiss. Loey sucked in a cold breath. His current luck was already at an A+ level protagonist treatment, and adding this skill, which could be called the ceiling of luck in another world. Isn't this going to take off? Loey felt his current luck was like stepping on his right foot with his left, spiraling upwards, directly breaking through the atmosphere. Closing the panel, Loey only felt refreshed, and even most of the soreness in his muscles had subsided. In a great mood, his thoughts began to drift. Since he had luck, he should do something to verify it. A thought from a few days ago suddenly surfaced in his mind. Speaking of which, is the plot concerning Toyokawa Shiho about to start? 16.8 billion yen. Loey flipped over on the bed, looking at the ceiling. Although he wasn't short of money now, relying on his status as a jujitsu sorcerer, who would complain about having too much money? Moreover, this money was originally swindled from the somewhat incompetent but decent-hearted Toyokawa Kiyosugu by that scumbag father, Toyokawa Sadaharu, through false accounting and fraud. Instead of letting that scumbag squander it, it was better to let him, a righteous partner, enact justice on behalf of heaven and incidentally pad his own little treasury. If I say I'll do it, I'll do it. Loey glanced at the time. It was exactly 2 in the morning. The moon was hidden and the wind was high, a perfect time to stir up trouble. He quietly got out of bed, not disturbing Artoria, who was sleeping in the adjacent room. After all, this kind of robbing the wicked didn't quite fit the style of the Night King, so it was better not to let her know. Changing into a set of black casual clothes and putting on a hood, Loie slipped out of Jujitsu High like a black cat. Although Loie knew the general direction of the plot, the specific operational details still required intelligent support. In this world, if you have money, there is definitely one person who can help you handle all intelligence matters. Half an hour later. In a private room of an all-night upscale cafe. A tall woman with a long white braid, exuding mature charm, was elegantly holding a coffee cup. My. The avaricious jiu-jitsu sorcerer who, if paid enough, could even sell out Gojo Satoru. I truly didn't expect classmate Loie to seek me out so late for something so worldly. My put down her coffee cup, her sharp eyes assessing Loie through her bangs, investigating the business movements of an ordinary person. That's not within Jujitsu High's mission scope, you know. This is a private commission. Loie cut to the chase and extended one finger, 100 million. Mai's pupils contracted slightly, and her previously languid smile instantly became sincere and brilliant. This is truly an offer that cannot be refused. She took out her phone, her slender fingers dancing rapidly across the screen. The person you want investigated is that live-in son-in-law of the Toyokawa family, Toyokawa Kiyosugu, right? Wait a moment. 1 hour later. Information so detailed that it even included what color underwear Toyokawa Kiyosugu was wearing that day, was placed before Loie. As Loie flipped through the documents, he couldn't help but marvel at the terrifying intelligence network of Mai. I see? It was almost the same as the plot in his memory. The Toyokawa family was currently at a delicate juncture. That cunning old fox, Toyokawa Sadaharu, after his illegitimate daughter, Mitsuki Mayako, was discovered, for some unknown reason, and also to drive the eyesore live-in son-in-law out of the house, set up an elaborate trap. At this moment, Toyokawa Kiyosugu had just fallen out with his father-in-law over the matter of Hatsune and was on the verge of being kicked out. Chapter 28, Donation. But he was not reconciled to this. To prove his ability, and to secure a stable future for his daughter, he was making a desperate real estate investment. This so-called investment project was actually a trap set by Toyokawa Sadaharu. So that's where the 16.8 billion funding gap came from. Loie looked at the overseas account marked in red on the documents, a cold smile curling on his lips. Toyokawa Sadaharu had instructed Kiyosugu to transfer the money to this newly opened overseas account under the pretext of tax avoidance and secret investment. In reality, Sadaharu had complete control over that account. Once the money was transferred, Sadaharu would turn around and report Kiyosugu for embezzlement, falsely claiming the money had been defrauded. At that point, Kiyosugu would not only lose the money but also be saddled with massive debt, forcing him to pack up and leave in disgrace. And that 16.8 billion would become Sadaharu's private stash. TSK, what a scheme. Loie closed the file and paid Mai the remaining balance. A pleasure doing business with you, classmate Luo Wei. Mai counted the zeros that had appeared in her account, feeling delighted. If there are any more good opportunities like this in the future, please be sure to look for me again. Definitely. After bidding farewell to Mai, Loie did not return to Jujitsu High. Instead, he headed directly to the Toyokawa real estate office building mentioned in the intelligence report. It was all ready for in the morning. The building was deserted, with only the security room emitting a faint light. For Loie now, sneaking into a place with this level of security was easier than strolling through his own backyard. He arrived at the chairman's office on the top floor. Loie expertly turned on the computer. Although it was password protected, under the blessing of truly good luck, he only tried a few common birthday combinations and succeeded on the first attempt. Is this the true value of great luck? Loie couldn't help but grumble. The screen lit up. The interface displayed a pending transfer page. It was the scheduled transaction Toyokawa Kiyosugu had set up in advance for tomorrow's transfer. The recipient was that overseas account, and the amount field showed a string of zeros that dazzled the eye. 168 billion yen. As expected, people become foolish when pushed to the limit. Lowy shook his head. Such a massive flow of funds was being handled with such a rudimentary procedure, showing absolutely no precaution against Toyokawa Sadaharu. Since that was the case, Lowy pulled a USB drive from his pocket. This was a disposable hacking gadget he had previously bought from MaiMai. Although its technical sophistication was low, it was more than enough to modify a recipient account. Clack clack clack. The sound of keyboard tapping echoed in the silent office. There was no thrilling battle of offense and defense. Lowy simply replaced a string of numbers in the recipient account. He swapped the overseas account originally belonging to Toyokawa Sadaharu with a virtual encrypted account he had just opened through the Jujitsu world. Done. Looking at the familiar account number on the screen, Lowy nodded with satisfaction. This was the crushing power of information asymmetry. Toyokawa Kiyosugu thought he was transferring money to his father-in-law, so he wouldn't bother verifying the account ownership. Toyokawa Sadaharu thought Kiyosugu was jumping into his trap, so he wouldn't go out of his way to remind Kiyosugu to verify the account. Both thought they were on the same level, but in reality, Lowy was in the stratosphere. Tomorrow morning at 9, as long as Kiyosugu presses that confirmation button. Lowy pulled out the USB drive, erased all traces of his operation, closed the computer, and put the slightly moved chair back in its original position. This 16.8 billion will flow into my pocket without anyone knowing. Toyokawa Sadaharu will only think Kiyosugu hasn't transferred the money yet, or that the transfer is delayed. And Kiyosugu will think he has completed the task. By the time they realize something is wrong, this money will have long been washed clean beyond recognition. This was the highest level of black-on-black crime. Since you intended to ruin this family, I will reluctantly take custody of this ill-gotten gain for you. Having done all this, Lowy stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the city that had not yet awakened below. Lowy stretched, feeling incomparably relaxed. With this money, I won't have to worry about how much delicious food I can buy for Artoria in the future. Just as he was envisioning the future, the eastern sky turned a pale, fishbelly white. A new day was about to begin. For the Toyokawa family, this would be the start of a nightmare. But for Lowy, this was just an insignificant interlude. It's about time to go back and catch up on sleep, otherwise if Leah discovers I stayed out all night, it'll be trouble. Lowy's figure flashed, disappearing into the morning light. Only the computer, in a dormant state, remained, quietly awaiting the multi-billion yen farce set to unfold in a few hours. 9 o'clock in the morning. Sunlight filtered through the gaps in the curtains, lazily spilling onto Lowy's face. The phone by his pillow vibrated once, emitting a crisp notification sound. Lowy rubbed his sleepy eyes and picked up the phone to take a look. It was a text message from the bank. Your account ending in 8848 received a deposit of 168 billion.00 yen at 9 o'clock. Current balance is. Looking at the long string of dazzling zeros, Lowy couldn't help but grin, eventually even chuckling out loud. That old fox Toyokawa Sadaharu is probably questioning his entire existence right now while staring at that empty overseas account, right? This was a dimensional strike delivered by information asymmetry. However, looking at this huge sum, Lowy didn't think about buying sports cars or mansions like a typical nouveau riche. For him, who possessed a system, money was sufficient as long as it was usable. Too much worldly wealth was actually a burden, and besides, this money had an unsavory origin. Even though it was black on black, holding it always felt like something was missing. Lowy's fingers flew across the screen as he dialed a number. Hello? This is MaiMai. The lazy yet magnetic mature woman's voice came from the other end of the line. The sound of counting banknotes could faintly be heard in the background. Calling so early, classmate Luo Wei, do you have another big business deal for your big sister? I do have a big deal. Lowy sat up in bed, his tone as relaxed as if he were discussing the weather that day. I have 16.2 billion yen that I need you to help me handle. Oh. MaiMai's voice instantly sharpened with interest. Money laundering? Or investment? Neither. It's a donation. Loie said lightly. Help me donate all 16.2 billion to poor areas in remote mountainous regions. Build roads, construct bridges, erect Hope primary schools, whatever is most practical. Some people who don't even know about these poverty alleviation projects are cursing here, trying to curse under the guise of patriotism. Go research these things first. These are all poverty alleviation projects in our area, meant for donations here. Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked Mai to monitor the funds, considering it involves cross-border tracking. Silence followed on the other end of the line for a few seconds. Clearly, even the well-informed Mai was baffled by this move. 16.2 billion, all donated? Classmate Luo Wei, are you joking? Do I look like I'm joking? Loie shrugged. But I have one condition. You must supervise the destination of these funds throughout the entire process. Chapter 29 Executing the Mission. Loie's voice suddenly turned cold, carrying an undeniable ruthlessness. I want you to use your connections and means to keep a tight watch on every single penny that flows. If the people in charge of construction, or the local administrators, dare to skim off even a single yen, then please have Miss Mai chop off their heads. Of course, I won't let you work for nothing, Loie added. Your commission fee is 100 million. Hearing the commission fee of 100 million, a pleasant laugh came from Mai's end. He, what a generous employer, full of a sense of justice. Don't worry, for that 100 million I absolutely will not allow anyone to touch that money. After all, that would be an insult to me. Then I'll leave it to you. Hanging up the phone, Loie looked at the 500 million yen remaining in his account, feeling completely satisfied. He punished the wicked, did a good deed, and still kept enough pocket money for himself. Noon, the Jujitsu High cafeteria. In front of Artoria, a small mountain range of empty bowls was still piled up. Ever since Loie became rich, Saber's dining standard had skyrocketed, upgrading from the usual cafeteria bulk meals to specially supplied high-class cuisine. Master, this tonkatsu tastes excellent. Artoria elegantly wiped her mouth, the ahoge on her head swaying contentedly. Although she ate a lot, her table manners were impeccable, watching her eat was a pleasure in itself. If you like it, eat more. I have plenty. Loie propped his cheek, watching his servant. Although this meal cost the equivalent of an ordinary person's monthly salary, the current Loie felt absolutely no pressure. Just then, a vibrant voice broke the cafeteria's tranquility. Loie! Saber! Itadori Yuji, wearing a modified red hooded uniform, rushed over energetically. Teacher Gojo said there's a mission. He told us to gather at the school gate. A mission? Loie nodded, not feeling surprised. Counting the time, that famous plot kill juncture should be arriving soon. Got it. Let's go. Loie stood up and casually helped Artoria adjust her collar. You need to eat your fill to have the strength to work. Yes, master. Artoria's eyes sharpened, instantly switching from eating mode to night mode. Jujitsu High School gate. The black sedan belonging to the assistant supervisor had long been waiting. Besides Fushiguro Megumi, who was already present, there was also an orange-haired girl wearing a black uniform, carrying a ball and chain weapon and a straw doll, impatiently kicking a pebble on the ground. Nobara Kujisaki. The heroine of Jujutsu Kaisen. Probably. Seeing the three people walking out of the school gate, Nobara Kujisaki's gaze first landed on Loie. Even someone as critical as her had to admit that the black-haired youth before her possessed truly striking looks. His features were delicate yet not effeminate, his tall posture combined with that nonchalant aura made him look like the male protagonist walking out of a shoujo manga. Wow! Nobara Kujisaki's eyes lit up, and much of her gloominess dissipated. Is this the new teammate? He's super handsome. And he looks like he has good taste. Although the blonde foreign girl next to him was also pretty, it didn't stop her from appreciating a handsome guy. I hope he has a decent personality, definitely not like that idiot teacher Gojo. Nobara prayed silently. However, the next second, Loie approached the group, glanced at the infatuated Kujisaki, looked at the serious Fushiguro Megumi, and finally fixed his gaze on the assistant supervisor, Ijichi Kiyotaka. Hey, glasses uncle. Loie pointed to the car behind him. Is this beat-up car the only one for this mission? Leah and I just finished eating, we don't want to squeeze in the back smelling BO. Ijichi. Fushiguro Megumi. The smile on Nobara Kujisaki's face froze. What was with this immediate, overwhelming scent of a spoiled young master and sharp tongue? Classmate Loie, this is the dedicated Jujitsu high vehicle. Ijichi wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. TCH, so cheap. Loie pursed his lips, opened the car door. Forget it, we'll make do. Leah, you take the front passenger seat, the back is too cramped. Watching Loie's self-entitled demeanor, Nobara Kujisaki felt the moment she was smitten was utterly wasted. Retracting my previous statement. This guy's personality is even worse than Gojo Satoru's. 2 in the afternoon. The sky was gloomy, as if foreshadowing the tragedy about to unfold. Standing before the building emanating an ominous aura, Loie's expression rarely showed a bit of its usual flippancy. This cursed spirit aura, it's truly sickening. Loie looked up at the top of the building. He knew that inside lay a finger of Sukyuna, and a special grade cursed spirit, cursed womb, death painting, hatched because of that finger. Although in the original story, this was a nightmare that nearly wiped out the protagonist group, for the current Loie, it was merely an experience pack. Ijichi stood to the side, his voice trembling slightly. This mission is extremely dangerous. Your primary goal is to confirm survivors and evacuate. Absolutely do not. All right, stop setting up flags. Loie interrupted Ijichi's rambling. We'll take care of it. With that, he took the lead and walked towards the main entrance. Born from darkness, reaching the deepest dark. As Ijichi deployed the curtain, a black barrier descended from the sky, enveloping the entire juvenile detention center, causing the already dim sky to turn completely pitch black. Upon entering the building, the space instantly became distorted and bizarre. The corridors looked like modeling clay kneaded by a giant hand, steel bars and concrete were exposed, and the direction of gravity became chaotic. Is this an innate domain? Fushiguro Megumi frowned, summoning the divine dogs. Although it hasn't fully materialized, this scale. We need to find the survivors quickly. Itadori, however, paid no mind to these details and rushed ahead. A few minutes later, the group stopped in front of a distorted boiler room. A corpse lay on the ground. It was a youth wearing prison clothes, completely lifeless. His upper body had been brutally torn apart, a gruesome sight. It's Aijing. Itadori recognized the deceased, he was one of the targets they were supposed to find for this mission. Looking at the tragic state of death, Itadori clenched his fists, wanting to take the body back. Don't move him, Fushiguro Megumi stopped Itadori. We need to confirm the surroundings are safe first. Carrying a corpse will only. What are you talking about? We have to take him back to his mother. Itadori roared emotionally. Just as the two were arguing fiercely, and Nobara Kujisaki was vigilantly watching their surroundings. Loie remained silent the entire time. He stood at the rear of the group, his gaze seemingly sweeping casually over the surrounding walls, but in reality, he was sensing the flow of cursed energy. That spine-chilling sense of oppression was silently closing in. Chapter 30, The Resolve of a Master. Just as Fushiguro Megumi and Itadori Yuji were in the middle of their fiercest argument. There were no footsteps, no killing intent. From within the wall behind Nobara Kujisaki, a pale, bizarre face, devoid of features save for a single mouth, slowly emerged, as if surfacing from water. A special grade cursed spirit, cursed womb, death painting. It didn't even spare a glance for the arguing pair. Instead, it raised its withered claw and launched an attack imbued with fatal cursed energy, aiming directly for the back of Nobara Kujisaki's head, the closest and seemingly weakest target. Fast! Too fast! Fushiguro Megumi had only just sensed the fluctuation of cursed energy. It was already too late to turn back and warn her. Nobara only felt a chill on the back of her neck. The fear of death instantly enveloped her, but her body refused to respond. Am I going to die? At that critical juncture. Clang! A silver flash tore through the dim air. It wasn't a flashy sword technique, but the purest, most extreme form of parrying. Artoria had appeared behind Nobara at some unknown time. Her sword of promised victory, shrouded by Wind King barrier, had its invisible edge precisely intercepting the cursed spirit's guaranteed strike. Sparks flew. The immense impact instantly cracked the surrounding walls. What? Nobara Kujisaki collapsed onto the floor, her pupils contracting violently as she stared at the small figure standing before her, a back that was as reliable as a mountain. Is this special grade? Failing its sneak attack, the cursed spirit let out a piercing, mocking laugh. Its body strangely retracted, attempting to melt back into the wall. Since you've come out, don't even think about leaving. Loei, who had been watching from the side, finally spoke. He took a step forward, positioning himself in front of everyone. The lazy demeanor he usually carried was completely gone. He glanced at the system panel. Mana, 1370. After several days of special training and recovery, these 1370 points of mana were sufficient for this battle. Saber. Loei's voice was calm and cold, like a monarch issuing an execution order. Go. Take care of it. No need to hold back. Let this special grade cursed spirit see what true power is. Yes, master. Artoria gripped her sword with both hands, her emerald green eyes boiling with fighting spirit. The wind began to howl in the narrow space. In the dim, distorted corridors of the juvenile detention center, a fierce wind raged. But this was not natural wind, it was the Wind King barrier stirred up by that unseen holy sword. Roar! The special grade cursed spirit, cursed womb, death painting, let out an enraged and terrified roar. As a newly born special grade, it instinctively sensed the danger posed by the golden-haired girl before it. It raised its hand, and massive cursed energy gathered in its palm, a pure energy blast capable of leveling this entire building. However, before the King of Knights, such crude energy manipulation was like a child swinging a large club. Too slow. Artoria's emerald eyes were perfectly still. She didn't even use her noble phantasm, merely bracing her stance with both hands on her sword. The next instant, she vanished. Boom! The cursed spirit's energy blasted empty air, blasting a large hole in the wall behind. Artoria had already appeared above the cursed spirit's head, and the wind-shrouded blade cleaved down heavily. There were no flashy techniques, only extreme speed and power. Accompanied by a grating sound of cracking bone, the cursed spirit's iron-hard body was smashed directly into the ground, causing the floorboards to shatter and collapse like a spider web. Gah! The cursed spirit tried to struggle, but the invisible sword was already pressed firmly against its throat. The sharp wind pressure pinned its limbs to the ground, rendering it immobile. This was a true servant, the legendary King of Knights. Even with her panel attributes restricted by the Master's mana, dealing with a newly born special grade cursed spirit that only knew how to carelessly throw out skills was still a one-sided crushing. Master, it has been subdued. Artoria spoke without turning her head, her tone as calm as if she had just trimmed a weed. Well done, Leah. Loei walked out from behind, maintaining a calm exterior, but inwardly he couldn't help but give his saber a thumbs up. Without Artoria, relying only on the current Itadori and Fushiguro, this fight would have been truly uncertain, and in the end, they would have had to let Sukuna resolve the matter. He walked up to the suppressed cursed spirit, looked at the ugly face that was still twisting and shrieking, and slowly extended his right hand. Although it looks disgusting, as feed, it's top-tier material. Lowy took a deep breath and activated the skill he had drawn earlier. Skill activated, Touch of Absorption. Buzz. The moment his palm touched the cursed spirit's head, a purple magic circle flashed. The cursed womb, death painting, which had been struggling, suddenly trembled violently. It felt as if the power within its body was being forcibly drawn out by an overbearing force. For Lowy, this was not a pleasant experience. Cursed energy was a collection of negative emotions, cold, viscous, and filled with malice. As this vast energy surged into his body through his arm, Lowy felt as if he had swallowed a giant block of ice whole. Even his soul was trembling. Convert, filter. Lowy gritted his teeth, cold sweat beading on his forehead. The system's conversion mechanism operated frantically, shattering and purifying this filthy cursed energy before transforming it into pure mana, injecting it into his previously dry mana circuits. Mana plus 100. Mana plus 200. Mana plus 500. The numbers on the system panel jumped wildly. What followed was an intense sensation of swelling. It was like a balloon capable of holding 1 liter of water being forcibly filled with 3 liters. His blood vessels throbbed, and his mana circuits were stretched open by the violent energy, letting out cries of unbearable strain. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If he wanted Artoria to unleash the sword of promised victory without restraint, he had to expand his own container. This process of forcibly expanding his mana limit, though painful, was the shortcut to becoming stronger. Finally, as the last bit of cursed energy was squeezed out, the body of the cursed womb, death painting, disintegrated and vanished like burnt ash. Clack! A dark red finger, resembling jerky, dropped onto the floor. It was Ryaman Sukuna's finger. And at this moment, Lowy didn't even have the strength to move a single finger. His face was flushed, his body burning hot, and he swayed precariously backward. He didn't fall onto the cold floor. An embrace carrying a faint, delicate fragrance caught him. Master! Artoria caught Lowy with a hint of anxiety. Looking at his state, which resembled a high fever, her brow furrowed. You were too reckless. This kind of forced absorption of foreign energy puts too much strain on the body. Heck ha ha. Lowy laughed weakly. Due to the excess mana, even his voice trembled slightly. Fortune favors the bold. I can't keep relying on Leah, I also want, for you to be able to fight as you please. Hearing this, Artoria froze for a moment. She looked at the boy in her arms, who was clearly grimacing in pain yet still smiling foolishly, and a soft spot in her heart was touched. What a foolish master. She sighed helplessly, then gently lifted Lowy into her arms, a standard bridal carry. Since you say so, then I cannot fail your resolve. Artoria adjusted her grip so Lowy could lie more comfortably. But until your body recovers, you must behave, master. Chapter 31, Gathering Information. Although Lowy felt it was a bit embarrassing to meet people in this posture, he genuinely couldn't even walk right now, so he settled into being a sleeping beauties without a second thought. At this moment, Nobara Kujisaki, who was behind them, was completely stunned. That was a special grade, just gone like that. Nobara Kujisaki's mouth hung wide open, she felt her worldview had been severely shaken. Just then, Artoria walked over carrying Lowy. Lowy struggled to lift his hand and pointed at the Sukuna's finger on the ground. Yuji, that is your snack. Eat it while it's hot. Itadori Yuji, huh? Oh. Okay. This kid was also rather carefree. He picked up the finger from the ground, didn't even wipe it, and swallowed it down in one gulp. Gulp. As the finger entered his stomach, the aura around Itadori instantly turned dangerous for a moment, and the markings of Sukuna reappeared on his face, but they were quickly suppressed. It doesn't taste very good, like old soap. Itadori smacked his lips, offering his assessment. Since the mission is complete, we'll take our leave now. Lowy, slumped in Artoria's arms, waved his hand weakly. As for the remaining report and cleanup, you can explain it yourselves when Gojo-sensei arrives. We're slipping out. After all, if Gojo Satoru saw that he could absorb cursed energy, he would probably be dragged off for another round of education through love. Loie just wanted to find a place to sleep soundly and digest the massive amount of magic power surging within him. Let's go, Leah. Yes. Artoria held Loie, tapped her toes, and vanished like the wind from the exit of the juvenile facility, leaving the trio staring blankly at each other. Inside a family restaurant near Jujitsu High. After 2 hours of rest and recuperation, Loie had finally recovered. He sat by the window, an iced coffee in front of him, checking his status panel. Magic power, 3290. 3,290 points. Loie clenched his fist, feeling the surging power within his body. Before, his total magic power was only a little over 1,000, he had to budget carefully even to use a big move. Now, although he hadn't reached the level of infinite firepower, he could at least support Artoria through a high-intensity, sustained battle. But it's still not enough. Loie looked at Artoria across the table, who was intently focused on devouring a giant parfait. To allow Saber to unleash her true noble phantasm, the sword of promised victory, this amount of magic power would likely be instantly drained. He needed to find more energy sources, or complete more system missions to raise his level. Speaking of which, missions. Loie stroked his chin. The system's mission trigger mechanism is usually related to plot characters. The more plot characters he interacts with, the higher the probability of triggering a mission. Although the plot at Jujitsu High was intense, the cast of characters was ultimately limited. Where would there be a place that gathers a large number of beautiful anime girls and has tons of interesting things happening? A flash of inspiration struck Loie, and he pulled out his phone. In his line contacts was a number labeled, Gluttonous Loser, Strike Through, Yanaomi Anna. Ring. Ring. The call was picked up after just 2 rings. Hello? Is that Loie? If you're treating me to a meal, my schedule is open right now. If you're here to collect a debt, please call back later. The girl's energetic voice came through the receiver, and he could faintly hear chewing sounds in the background. Old spot, I'll treat you to cake, Loie said concisely. Be right there. 10 minutes later. A girl with short blue hair, cute features, yet exuding an inexplicable's pitiful aura, Yanaomi Anna, appeared before Loie right on time. Wow! Is this the legendary limited-time strawberry tart? Seeing the dessert the waiter brought over, Yanaomi Anna's eyes were shining. Her blissful expression made it impossible to associate this girl with being a typical loser-type of heroine. Eat, eat! Loie propped his chin up, watching the girl who could be lured away by just food, and got straight to the point. By the way, Anna, there's something I need to ask you. What is it? Yanaomi Anna asked vaguely, her mouth stuffed with cake. In your school, or among people you know, are there any, particularly famous, or particularly interesting people? Loie carefully chose his words. Like some super-rich young mistress, or perhaps a genius with a very eccentric personality. Usually, the protagonists of slice-of-life anime tend to cluster in certain specific schools. Yanaomi Anna should know. Interesting people. Yanaomi Anna swallowed the cake in her mouth, tilted her head in thought, and tapped her chin with a cream-smeared fork. If you mean young mistresses, my school, Shuchiing Academy, has quite a few. As expected. Upon hearing the words Shuchiing Academy, Loie's eyes lit up. Who are they? Loie pressed. The most famous should be the young mistress of the Shinomiya conglomerate, right? Her name is Shinomiya Kagaya. I heard she's very cold and terrifying. Yanaomi Anna counted on her fingers. There's also Fujiwara Chika, who always wears a black ribbon. I saw her in the cafeteria there last time. She was eating some super weird ramen. Oh, right. And the second young lady of the Yukino Shita family, Yukino Shita Yukino. Even though she's not in the same class, she's also considered an acknowledged ice beauty. And as Loie listened to the familiar names popping out of Yanaomi Anna's mouth, Shinomiya Kagaya, Fujiwara Chika, Yukino Shita Yukino. Even Hayasaka Ari, Ino Yu Iko, and others. The smile on Loe's face gradually widened. Good heavens. This isn't a school, this is practically a harem protagonist mashup. Besides the girls who form bands, who might be filming on another set, this basically covers all the high-popularity slice-of-life heroines from recent years. For Loe, who possessed a system, this wasn't just a gathering place for beautiful girls, it was a moving experience pack and an emission trigger point. It's decided. Loe looked out at the bustling street, his eyes flashing with the light of stirring up trouble. From now on, besides the missions at Jujutsu High, I think I need to frequently visit Shuchiing Academy. After all, a massive treasure trove was waiting for him to develop there. Eh? Loe, are you transferring to our school? Yanaomi Anna asked curiously. Although I'd welcome it, since you could treat me to food every day. Transferring isn't necessary, but I can act as a special consultant or something. Also, don't forget, you still owe me money. Loe smiled meaningfully. Seeing Loe's expression, which resembled a big bad wolf staring at a sheep pen, Yanaomi Anna, who was eating cake, inexplicably shivered. Ha ha ha, I get it. I just have a feeling, something huge is about to happen at school. Extra chapter update. Chapter 32, Artoria is a student. Shuchiing Academy, an elite school that gathers the children of many prestigious and powerful families. Today, this seemingly peaceful campus welcomed a slightly special new member. The psychology consultation room. This was an office decorated quite warmly, with warm-toned curtains, a comfortable sofa, and an office desk large enough for an afternoon nap. The newly appointed psychology teacher, Loe, was comfortably seated in the executive chair, spinning a fountain pen in his hand. On the sofa in front of him, a blonde girl wearing the black uniform of Shuchiing Academy was looking at him with confusion. Master. Artoria tugged at the red bow tie at her collar, seemingly slightly unaccustomed to this restrictive modern attire. I don't understand, why are we here? Her emerald green eyes were full of doubt. We were just fighting that terrifying curse yesterday, and today we have to waste time in this scholarly place. This is just an ordinary school, right? To the King Arthur, who once charged across battlefields, this atmosphere of peace, so tranquil it was almost excessive, instead gave her a strange sense of restlessness. An ordinary school. Loe stopped the pen in his hand and smiled meaningfully. Leah, you underestimate this place too much. For some people, the intensity of the wars here is no less than that of a battlefield, you know. Of course, he was referring to the strange battle of wits called Love is War. However, Loe didn't state it outright, choosing to approach from another angle. Besides, Leah, didn't you always have a regret? Loe leaned back against the chair, looking at her with a gentle gaze. Regret? You said that if it wasn't you who pulled the sword in the stone, if a more capable and perfect person could become king, perhaps the fate of Britain would have been different. Hearing these words, Artoria's eyes dimmed slightly. This was the eternal pain in her heart, and the past she had always wanted to change through a wish upon the Holy Grail. Since you long for that what if so much, then. Loe stood up, walked in front of Artoria, and gently patted her shoulder. You no longer bear the fate of Britain. Why not try to experience the life that the Artoria who never drew the sword should have had? A life without drawing the sword. Artoria froze. If that were the case, perhaps she would have grown up like an ordinary country girl, perhaps she would have studied knowledge, perhaps she would have attended an ordinary school in a peaceful era, just like now. Therefore, this is both an order and my expectation. Loe looked into her eyes and said seriously, go to school, Leah. Make friends, learn things you don't know, and enjoy every day without holding a sword. This is your mission here. Artoria remained silent for a long time. She looked into Loe's eyes, which seemed to have seen through everything long ago, and finally, her tense shoulders slowly relaxed. I understand, Master. She stood up. Although her expression was still somewhat serious, most of the resistance in her eyes had dissipated. Since this is also to help me better understand the human heart, I will put my full effort into it. No, you don't need to put your full effort in. Just have fun. Loey shook his head helplessly. Why did this girl treat everything like a mission? Just then. Ding! A crisp system notification sounded in Loey's mind. Loey subconsciously looked over and saw a golden exclamation mark suddenly pop up next to Artoria's signature Ahoj. Trigger character exclusive mission, The Night King's School Life. Mission description, allow Artoria, who dedicated her entire life to the nation, to truly experience the joy of being an ordinary girl. Please guide her to integrate into the group and enjoy youth. Mission reward, Primogem X1000, special item, mysterious dungeon challenge ticket, Artoria exclusive, X1. Loey raised an eyebrow. 1,000 Primogems were standard, but this the mysterious dungeon challenge ticket was interesting. Artoria exclusive? Besides the Britain full of regrets and tragedy, Loey couldn't think of any other dungeon specifically prepared for her. Could it be that I have to take her back to the past to truly change history? A ripple rose in Loey's heart. If that were truly the case, the weight of this mission would be too heavy. Relying only on current strength would be far from enough to change that kind of ending. All right, hurry up, the school bell is about to ring. Loey collected his thoughts, pushed Artoria out of the office, and said, remember to come find me for lunch, don't go hungry. Yes, master. Watching Artoria's somewhat stiff but determined back disappear at the end of the corridor, Loey closed the door and sat back down at his desk. Who? Next, I should get down to business. Loey took a deep breath and took out the notebook he had borrowed from Gojo Satoru from the drawer. It recorded various profound techniques for cursed energy manipulation. Although he didn't have a buggy innate technique like Limitless, this didn't mean he had no way to become stronger. In this crossover world, although the power systems were complex, their essence was interconnected. Whether it was magic power or cursed energy, both were forms of energy utilization. If I don't have a cursed technique, I'll strengthen the fundamentals to the extreme. Loey opened the notebook, his gaze falling on 2 pages. Black Flash and Reverse Cursed Technique. One was causing a geometric increase in power by combining physical impact with the spatial distortion caused by cursed energy impact. The other was multiplying negative cursed energy to produce positive energy, used to heal the body. Reverse Cursed Technique shouldn't be difficult for me. Loey looked at his own palm. He possessed Touch of Absorption, which allowed him to freely convert between vitality and magic power. As long as he slightly understood the principle of positive and negative poles of cursed energy, even without being as gifted as Shoko, being able to be his own healer should be no problem. As for Black Flash, this thing depends on luck, but it also depends on the fine control of energy. Loey closed his eyes and began to try mobilizing the magic power within him. Previously, his magic power was like stagnant water, decreasing with use. But since absorbing the cursed energy from Cursed Womb, Death Painting, his total magic power had surged to over 3,000 points, already having that feeling of a rushing current. As long as he could precisely control this rushing current and unleash it at the moment of impact. Moreover, if I can change the nature of magic power like cursed energy. Just as Loey was immersed in exploring and contemplating power. Knock, knock, knock. A knocking sound, extremely rhythmic and even carrying a kind of cheerful melody, sounded. Chapter 33, Student Fujiwara's Report. Before Loey could say please come in, the office door was pushed open by a small, fair hand. Excuse me Tilda, is this the new psychology consultation room? Accompanied by a sweet, cloying fragrance, a pink figure hopped in like a little rabbit. Her long pink hair was tied with a black bow, her ample chest stretched her school uniform into an astonishing curve, and her face wore a smile so innocent it almost made one's stomach turn. The secretary of the Shuchiing Academy Student Council, the woman known by many titles such as Cancer of the Earth and Source of Chaos, Fujiwara Chika. The pen in Loey's hand almost slipped. Good heavens, on the very first day of opening, such a heavyweight character has arrived? Oh? Teacher looks quite young. Fujiwara Chika paid no mind to Loe's slightly strange expression. She walked right up to the desk, placed both hands on the surface, leaned forward, and scrutinized Loe with her large eyes. "Nice to meet you. I am the student council secretary, Fujiwara Chika." She sounded thrilled, as if she had discovered a new toy. "I heard a super handsome psychology teacher came here, so I just had to come and see." "The rumors are true." Loe composed himself. Although the visitor was a chaotic evil, she was still a beautiful girl, and furthermore, a plot pointer delivered right to his doorstep. He pushed up his non-existent glasses and revealed a professional smile. "Hello, Student Fujiwara. So, as the student council secretary, do you have any psychological troubles you need to consult about? If it's about romantic troubles, I'm actually very good at that." Upon hearing the word romance, a radar seemed to instantly pop up above Fujiwara Chika's head. Tilda actually, it's not me who has the trouble." She held up one finger and leaned conspiratorially close to Loe. "It's because Student Kagaya has been acting super weird lately. I think she must be sick. Maybe lovesickness or something. Since teacher is so capable, can you help Student Kagaya? As payment, I can treat you to cookies." Loe looked at the pink-haired girl whose face clearly read "I'm here to stir up trouble," and the smile on his lips deepened. As expected. As long as she was around, life at this school would certainly not be boring. Deal. Loe closed the notebook in his hand. "But forget the cookies. How about you tell me the specific symptoms of that student Shinomiya Kagaya?" Holding the freshly brewed hot tea, Loe blew away the steam above it, waiting for Fujiwara Chika to speak. She lowered her voice and leaned mysteriously close to Loe, as if sharing a secret capable of destroying the world. "Teacher, I actually discovered it a long time ago. There's a problem with Kagaya's relationship with Yukino." "Phut." The teacup Loe was bringing to his lips froze mid-air, the tea inside nearly spilling out. He raised an eyebrow, set down the cup, and his gaze became somewhat peculiar. Shinomiya Kagaya. Yukino Shita Yukino. These two names placed together usually represented a height of IQ, or the collision of icebergs. But if it was a problematic relationship? A string of indescribable images flashed through Loe's mind. For example, two equally proud young ladies pulling at each other's neckties in an empty student council room, or cornering each other against a wall on the rooftop under the setting sun. Cough, cough. Loe cleared his throat, trying to mask the wayward thoughts that had crossed his mind for a moment. "Student Fujiwara, as a teacher, I must ask rigorously. When you say a problematic, are you referring to that kind of problem beyond the boundaries of friendship?" "Exactly." Fujiwara Chika nodded heavily, the black bow on her head trembling. "That kind of atmosphere. That kind of pink, gay-coded, heart-pounding atmosphere when you see it." Just then, the familiar translucent panel popped up before Loe's eyes again. Ding! Side quest triggered, thus forbidden a relationship between Kagaya and Yukino. Quest description: as a conscientious psychology teacher, and also to satisfy a certain unspeakable curiosity, please investigate the true private relationship between Shinomiya Kagaya and Yukino Shita Yukino. Quest reward, 150 Prima Gems. Looking at the reward, which wasn't exactly generous but was certainly interesting, the smile on Loe's lips gradually widened. 150 Primo Gems. Although not much, it was free money. Moreover, if he could actually witness these two top iceberg beauties getting involved, then this price of admission would be well worth it. Although he was thinking, "This is fantastic," the expression on Loe's face instantly turned incredibly serious, even carrying a hint of heartbreak and distress. He slapped the desk with a crisp snap, startling Fujiwara Chika. "Outrageous!" Loe declared righteously, his voice ringing with power. "Of course, as a teacher, I must stop impure interactions between students." "Eh?" Fujiwara Chika was momentarily stunned. "Impure interactions." "That's right." Loe stood up, hands clasped behind his back, and began his performance. At this moment, he seemed to have transformed into the most rigid and dogmatic head of the disciplinary committee. He nodded with a solemn expression. Girls interacting with girls is impure. It violates the laws of nature. It is also a massive waste of youthful resources. Saying this, he turned around, his gaze fixed intently on Fujiwara Chika, and shook a finger at her. I only support heterosexual relationships. That is the harmonization of yin and yang, the truth of the universe. As for homosexuality, it is simply heinous. The air fell silent for a few seconds. Chika blinked her big eyes, looking at the teacher who moments ago seemed gentle and handsome, but now suddenly appeared like an ancient relic transported from the Taisho era. Her expression became somewhat awkward. Ha, ha, ha. Chika gave a dry laugh and took half a step back. Teacher, although I also think they are a bit strange, your statement, isn't it a little extreme? In this era, to hear such direct and discriminatory remarks about homosexuality, especially from a psychology teacher, was like seeing a rare animal. Extreme. Lowy shook his head, wearing an air of profound wisdom that suggested the masses are drunk, but I alone am sober. This is not extreme, this is the most basic understanding. As a psychology teacher, I have an obligation to guide wandering lambs back onto the right path. In reality, Lowy was inwardly ecstatic. He was certainly not an old relic, on the contrary, he was an absolute omnivore. But that didn't stop him from establishing the persona of a rigid and stern teacher now. After all, only by doing so would the contrast be greater when he starts stirring up trouble later, wouldn't it? With a grand gesture, Lowy straightened his tie and spoke with great presence. Lead the way, Student Chika. Let us conduct a surprise inspection of the student council and see what those two are up to. Seeing Lowy's I'm going to catch them in the act of momentum, Fujiwara Chika's troublemaking factor was completely activated. Although she thought the teacher was a bit strange, it seemed like it would be very interesting. Okay. Let's go. Fujiwara Chika raised her right hand high, shouting excitedly like an elementary school student going on a field trip. For the purity of the student council. Detective Chika, dispatch. P.S. Our white-silver president is currently studying abroad. She was scouted by capital interests and sent abroad long before enrolling at Shuqing Academy. Chapter 34, Student Chika has been sold out. Shuqing Academy, Student Council Office. This was the pinnacle of power in this elite school, a sacred place yearned for by countless students. The heavy double wooden doors were pushed open. Led by Fujiwara Chika, Lowy swaggered in. Unexpectedly, the office was empty. The afternoon sunlight spilled onto the president's desk, a symbol of authority, and the air was filled with the faint aroma of black tea. Ooh? They aren't here. Fujiwara Chika peeked around, muttering with slight disappointment, they should all be having tea right now. It's better that they aren't here, it makes it easier for us to gather evidence. Lowy showed no politeness, walking directly to the leather high-backed chair reserved only for the president and sitting down, even giving it a comfortable spin. Come on, Student Chika, while they aren't back, tell me the details first. Lowy interlaced his hands under his chin, adopting the posture of a commander. Why do you think the two of them are lesbians? Did you see any specific actions, or did you hear any scandalous words? The moment this was brought up, Fujiwara Chika immediately perked up. She mysteriously ran to the door, peeked into the hallway, and after confirming no one was there, she closed the door, then leaned close to Lowy like a spy meeting an informant. Teacher, you don't know. That scene was so shocking. Fujiwara Chika took a deep breath and began to recount the truth as she saw it. It was last Friday after school. I went back because I forgot my game console, and I saw student Kagaya corner student Yukino. Caved on. Lowy played along at the right moment. Worse than caved on. Fujiwara Chika gestured animatedly. Student Kagaya's face was super close to Yukino-chan's, almost touching. And student Kagaya said with a cold expression, this is the last time. If you still don't accept, I will use forceful measures. And then? Loie raised an eyebrow. Then, although Yukino-chan looked very unwilling and her face was red, she finally closed her eyes, looking completely submissive. Fujiwara Chika covered her flushed cheeks. I was so scared I didn't dare go in, I could only sneak away. Since then, those two have always been whispering together, and as soon as they see me coming, they immediately separate. There must be something wrong. Listening to Fujiwara Chika's description, Loie's mouth twitched a couple of times. Cornered? Using forceful measures? Blushing and closing her eyes? If someone else had said this, Loie might have actually believed the two were involved in a Yui relationship. But the speaker was Fujiwara Chika. This woman with a peculiar train of thought, natural darkness, and an extreme tendency for strange delusions. The so-called cornering was most likely Shinomiya Kagaya using her demeanor to pressure Yukino Shita into doing something she was unwilling to do. The so-called forceful measures probably referred to student council work assignments. As for blushing and closing eyes? Perhaps Yukino Shita was dizzy from anger, or maybe it was just a sigh of resignation. Loie looked at Fujiwara Chika, who was still lost in self-intoxication, mentally drafting a 10,000-word Yui tragedy plot, and had already reached a conclusion. Student Chika? Loie sighed, his eyes filled with pity. Don't you read too many shoujo manga? Eh? How did teacher know I've been reading the Yui version of The Domineering President Falls in Love with Me? Fujiwara Chika answered subconsciously. As expected. All of this was caused by the yellow trash in this pink-haired girl's head. You could spin such an obvious misunderstanding into this. Should I call you naive, or should I call you too perverted? Loie grumbled internally. Since that was the case. Loie's eyes darted around, and a brilliant plan surfaced in his mind. Since you dragged teacher into this mess, don't blame teacher for using you as a stepping stone. After all, the fastest way to complete the system mission was to lay everything out directly and observe the reactions of the parties involved. Just then. Click. The sound of the doorknob turning echoed. The door to the student council office was pushed open. Two figures walked in side by side. On the left, black hair and red eyes, with a noble and cold demeanor, like Kagayaheim stepping out of a Heian period scroll, Shinomiya Kagaya. On the right, also long straight black hair, but with a colder and sharper aura, unapproachable like a flower on a high peak, Yukino Shita Yukino. The two seemed to be discussing a serious topic about budget approvals when they saw the strange man sitting in the office, and their voices abruptly stopped. The air instantly solidified. Shinomiya Kagaya's cold red eyes narrowed slightly, emitting a suffocating pressure. Yukino Shita Yukino frowned slightly, hugging her arms, her gaze sweeping over Loie like a knife. Finally, both their gazes landed simultaneously on Fujiwara Chika, who stood to the side with a guilty expression. Chika? Shinomiya Kagaya's voice betrayed no emotion, but carried an absolute authority. Who is this? Entering the student council office without permission, and even sitting in the president's seat. If Fujiwara Chika couldn't provide a reasonable explanation, Shinomiya Kagaya was already considering whether to throw this man into Tokyo Bay or sink him in the Pacific Ocean. Facing the gaze of the two great demons, Fujiwara Chika instinctively shrank her neck and was about to start explaining, actually. However, someone spoke faster than her. Loie stood up from the chair, straightened his suit, and revealed his signature smile filled with righteousness. He took the initiative to speak, his voice loud and clear. I am the new psychology teacher at the school, Loie. He first introduced himself, then shifted the topic, directly raising his hand to point at Fujiwara Chika, who hadn't reacted yet. It turns out, student Chika just ran to my office to report that student Kagaya and student Yukino are lesbians, meaning they are engaging in impure relations. Boom! It was as if a thunderclap exploded inside the student council office. Shinomiya Kagaya's icy expression instantly cracked, and her whole body froze in place. The document Yukino Shita Yukino was holding slapped onto the floor. She, usually sharp-tongued, now had her mouth wide open, her face blank with shock. Lesbians. However, Lowy didn't give them a chance to recover. He added righteously, "I think this matter is extremely serious and must be dealt with strictly. So I specifically came over to see if it's really like what student Chika described, that you two often do things in the office that cannot bear to be seen." After speaking, Lowy deliberately turned his head and showed a brilliant smile to Fujiwara Chika, who was now completely stunned. "Don't be afraid, student Chika, teacher has already spoken the truth for you." Dead silence. A silence as if death itself. A few seconds later, Shinomiya Kagaya and Yukino Yukino slowly turned their stiff necks, their eyes filled with murderous intent, shame, and a terrifying look of wanting to silence someone permanently, locking onto Fujiwara Chika. "Hey!" Fujiwara Chika looked at Lowy's handsome face, which was written with "I am innocent," and finally realized what had happened. She let out a shrill cry of protest. "Teacher, you betrayed me. P.S. Fujiwara Chika, everyone, do you think Kagaya will sanction me?" Chapter 35, Yukino's Explanation. The air inside the student council faculty office seemed to solidify instantly, like thick glue. Lowy sat in the comfortable president's leather chair, spreading his hands wide, his shoulders slightly shrugged in a perfect imitation of a French shrug gesture. His handsome face was etched with innocence, as if to say, "I really want to help you, but as a teacher full of justice, I cannot turn a blind eye to lies." Eh? Fujiwara Chika looked at Lowy in disbelief, her pink long hair flying wildly as she shook her head vigorously. She opened her mouth, wanting to explain, wanting to argue, wanting to tell these two demon lords that it's not like that, but her throat felt stuffed with cotton, only managing to emit meaningless monosyllables. This was because two terrifying auras, potent enough to suffocate ordinary people, were slowly rising behind her. "Heh!" A soft chuckle, yet it was as cold as the Siberian wind. Shinomiya Kagaya kept her head slightly lowered, her bangs obscuring her eyes, making her expression unreadable, but the surrounding air had noticeably dropped several degrees. On the other side, Yukino Yukino was expressionless, her already cool eyes were now like glacier that had not melted for 10,000 years. She gently pushed back the long hair draped over her shoulders, an elegant movement, yet one that exuded a chilling murderous intent. Lowy watched this scene, nearly bursting with laughter internally, but he maintained a serious expression on his face, as if conveying, "I am doing this for your own good." He decided to add more fuel to the fire. "Ahoom!" Lowy cleared his throat, ignoring the tense atmosphere between them, and pulled out a non-existent notebook from his pocket, reading with utmost seriousness. According to student Chika's testimony just now, the specific situation is as follows. Stop it, teacher!" Fujiwara Chika desperately reached out to stop him. But Lowy spoke extremely fast, giving her no chance. First, after school last Friday, student Kagaya forcibly cornered student Yukino and executed what is known as a Kabadan action, accompanied by a domineering declaration. Shinomiya Kagaya's fist tightened with a crisp crack sound. Second, the two individuals' faces were extremely close, to the point where they could feel each other's breath, and student Yukino's complexion flushed, causing her to give up resisting. Yukino Yukino's eye twitched slightly. Her hands, originally crossed over her chest, were gripping so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. Based on the above, student Chika believes that you two are engaged in an impure relationship that deviates from ethics and involves coercion. Lowy closed the notebook and stared intently at the two whose faces had turned dark. He spoke righteously. "As the psychology teacher, I have an obligation to verify the situation. Therefore, please explain to me what exactly is going on. Is what student Chika said true?" Boom! If looks could kill, Fujiwara Chika would have been hacked into 1,000 pieces by now. Student Fujiwara. Shinomiya Kagaya's voice seemed to grind out from between her teeth. She walked slowly toward Fujiwara Chika's back with elegant yet heavy steps, resting one hand lightly on the trembling shoulder of the secretary. "You absolutely must give us a reasonable explanation." Her voice was so gentle it made one's scalp tingle, like the whisper of death in one's ear. "I am also very curious." Yukinoshita Yukino had moved to Fujiwara Chika's other side without anyone noticing, forming a perfect pincer movement. Her voice was cool, carrying a hint of anger at the insult to her intelligence. "Student Fujiwara, please explain in detail what twisted logic you used to arrive at the absurd conclusion that we are hooking up." Woo woo woo. Fujiwara Chika now resembled a little white rabbit surrounded by two apex predators, trembling uncontrollably. She slowly turned around, looking at the two powerful figures with teary eyes, anxiously fiddling with her index fingers together in front of her chest. That. Because the atmosphere was just too similar. I see it drawn that way in manga. And student Kagaya was really aggressive at the time. Seeing that the pink-haired girl was about to be executed on the spot, Loie, the instigator, felt the heat was just right. If he played along any further, a bloody incident might occur in the student council. That's enough. Loie tapped the table at the opportune moment, his voice returning to normal. I am the new psychology teacher here, and I need to confirm whether your mental states are healthy. So, please answer my previous question instead of threatening the witness here. Although this witness's brain really doesn't seem to work very well, Loie silently added to himself. Hearing the teacher intervene, Yukinoshita Yukino took a deep breath, forcefully suppressing the anger in her heart. She was a reasonable person. Although the current situation was absurd, she still chose to clarify when questioned by the teacher. Yukinoshita Yukino turned around, looking directly into Loie's eyes, and stated clearly, "Teacher, this is entirely the delusion produced by Fujiwara's barren brain filled with yellow trash. The so-called cornering happened because student Kagaya was questioning the efficiency of my review of the student council budget reports. She was trying to overwhelm me with her presence to force me to admit she was right." At this point, Yukinoshita glanced at Kagaya beside her, her tone carrying a hint of mockery. As for the flushed complexion, that was due to being angered by someone's unreasonable logic. I closed my eyes at the time only to think about how to refute her fallacy in the most concise language. Nothing more. Simply put, this was friction arising from work between two equally proud, equally excellent elites who refused to yield to the other. The result was interpreted by Fujiwara Chika, the love-struck brain, as a tragic romance. After hearing the explanation, Loie nodded thoughtfully. Just as expected. Simultaneously, the player panel on his retina flickered again. Ding! Mission complete, Kagaya and Yukino's forbidden a relationship. Mission evaluation, you successfully exposed the truth, albeit by betraying a teammate, and enjoyed a wonderful Shiraba, love rivalry scene. Reward issued, Primo Gem X150. Contented. With the Primo Gem secured and the show watched to his satisfaction, Loie felt it was time to retreat successfully. He stood up, straightened the slightly wrinkled hem of his suit, and offered the three girls a gentle smile. I see. It seems student Chika misunderstood. Since this was an argument over work, it falls within the normal scope. As long as it's not lesbianism, teacher is relieved. Since the misunderstanding is cleared up, I won't bother you students with your student council work anymore. Farewell. Saying that, Loie turned around dashingly and prepared to leave this place of trouble. As for staying behind to be complained about by Fujiwara Chika, that was impossible. Chapter 36, Yukino's Invitation. However, just as Loie's hand was about to touch the doorknob. Please wait a moment. A clear, cool voice called out to him. Loie stopped in his tracks and turned back with a hint of confusion. He saw that Yukinoshita Yukino had somehow circled around the desk and was now standing in front of him, blocking his path. Classmate Yukinoshita, is there something else? Loie asked. If this is about an appointment for psychological counseling, you can come to my office tomorrow. Yukinoshita Yukino shook her head, her distinct black and white eyes staring intently at Loie, as if scrutinizing something. After a moment, she seemed to make a decision and spoke. Teacher Loie, I formally invite you to become the advisor for my club. Who? Loie was momentarily stunned. What club? Are there clubs at this school that specifically need a teacher as an advisor? Don't most clubs just need a name attached? Shita Yukino slightly raised her chin and uttered 3 words. The service club. The instant those 3 words fell, Loi's system panel popped up again. Ding! Long-term side quest triggered, Shita Yukino's club. Quest description, the service club, a club dedicated to lending a hand to those in need. Please serve as the club's supervising teacher and ensure the club survives and continues amidst the elite gathering of Shuqing Academy. Quest reward, 300 Primo Gems. 300 Primo Gems? Loi's eyes lit up slightly. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was that the service club had appeared in Shuqing Academy. It seemed the fusion level of this world was higher than he had imagined. However, Loi didn't show any eagerness. He still needed to maintain the gravitas of a teacher. He put his hands in his pockets, leaned against the doorframe, and looked at the Ice Queen with interest. Classmate Yukino Shita, if I recall correctly, this should be our first meeting. There are plenty of excellent teachers in this school. Why specifically invite me, a newcomer who has been employed for less than 2 hours, to be the advisor? If it was just to meet the minimum requirement, wouldn't it be easier to find some easygoing teacher? Shita Yukino looked at Loi, and a glimmer of approval flashed in her eyes. The reason is very simple. Her cool voice echoed in the quiet office, because you dare to meddle. What? Loi raised an eyebrow. At this Shuqing Academy, most teachers fear the family backgrounds behind the students. When facing the student council, facing the Shinomiya family, or other children of the powerful, they often choose to turn a blind eye or play it safe. Shita Yukino paused here, her gaze sweeping over Shinomiya Kagaya and Fujiwara Chika, who were still somewhat bewildered nearby, before returning to Loi. But you, teacher, are different. You are clearly just a newly arrived psychology teacher, yet you dared to barge directly into the student council office, even daring to sit in the president's seat and question Shinomiya Kagaya about whether she was engaging in improper relationships. When saying the words improper relationships, Shita Yukino's cheeks couldn't help but flush slightly, but she quickly returned to normal. This kind of recklessness, which defies authority and could even be called rashness without strategy, is exactly what the service club needs right now. We need an advisor who won't back down no matter who the other party is, to guarantee the fairness of our club activities. After hearing this, Loi couldn't help but laugh. Rashness without strategy? Recklessness? That assessment was truly, very Shita. However, this also meant his earlier performance had successfully caught the attention of this second young lady. In this strictly hierarchical school, being a maverick teacher seemed like a decent entry point. He could earn Primo Gems while naturally inserting himself into the main character's plot line. Why not? Loi nodded, dropping the roguish smile from his face, and extended his right hand. I see. Your reasoning has convinced me. Since it is for the purpose of helping students in need, then as the psychology teacher, I am naturally duty-bound. I understand. I will become the supervising teacher for your club. Looking at the hand extended before her, Shita Yukino was slightly startled, then a very faint smile, like a snow lotus blooming, curved the corner of her mouth. She extended her slender hand and lightly shook Loi's. Please guide me well, Teacher Loi. Please guide me well, classmate Shita. The handshake was sealed. Meanwhile, Fujiwara Chika, who had been completely ignored, blinked. She looked at Loi, then at Shita, and suddenly shouted out as if realizing something profound. Ah! Could this be the legendary teacher-student? Shut up, Chika! Shut up, Fujiwara! This time, Loi and Shita Yukino spoke in unison. Since we decided on the advisor role, there are some hard requirements that need to be confirmed first. Loi didn't rush to discuss philosophy with Shita Yukino. Instead, he held up 5 fingers and waved them in the slightly empty student council office. Classmate Shita, although I am a new teacher, I did skim through the school's club regulations before coming here. For a formal club to obtain activity funds and a room, the minimum membership requirement is 5 people. Saying this, Loi's gaze swept over the solitary Shita Yukino standing before him. And right now, the so-called service club only has you, the sole commander, at full strength, right? Shita Yukino nodded slightly, her ink-black long hair swaying gently with the movement. She didn't deny this awkward reality, instead, she stated calmly. That is indeed the case. Currently, I am the only member. After all, people in this school who can keep up with my pace of thought and possess the noble character required to improve themselves through labor are truly rare birds. This girl really is humble bragging at every opportunity. Loi grumbled internally, then a playful smile curved his lips, and his gaze inadvertently drifted toward the pink-haired girl who was trying to sneak away. Since you are short on people, that's easy to fix. As the advisor, I have an obligation to help you solve this urgent problem. Loi pointed at himself. I happen to have a few, rather special students on hand who I can place into your club. Of course. His finger suddenly pivoted, accurately pointing at the pink-haired girl who was preparing to slip away quietly. Classmate Fujiwara Chika, as the originator of this entire misunderstanding, you must also join to atone for your sins. Eh? Fujiwara Chika let out a shriek like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. She crossed her hands over her chest in a large X and protested with a flushed face. I protest. I absolutely protest. I already have a club. I'm a core member of the board game club. And Fujiwara Chika took 2 steps back, looking at Loi and Shita Yukino with a gaze one reserves for a pervert, and lowered her voice. And I absolutely do not want to join a club whose name sounds super H. Serving or whatever. That word is definitely forbidden on a high school campus. I am the student council secretary of the Pure faction. Chapter 37, Fujiwara Chika, R. The air fell into a dead silence once more. Classmate Shita's eyebrows instantly furrowed, her already cool demeanor dropping to freezing point. She looked at student Fujiwara as if she were looking at some kind of irredeemable trash. Student Fujiwara. Classmate Shita sighed, her tone filled with pity for the lowest limits of human intelligence. Is there anything serious inside your brain besides pink, useless sludge? The service club is not the lewd organization you imagine it to be. It's because you are too lewd yourself that you associate everything in that direction. Woo! Student Fujiwara was struck dumb by the retort and could only puff up her cheeks in grievance. Classmate Shita turned her head, ignoring the pink amoeba in the corner, and looked towards Loi, explaining seriously. Mr. Loi, the philosophy of the service club is not simply helping, it is not a false benevolence where we mindlessly offer aid just because someone cries out for it. She paused, her gaze firm, as the saying goes, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. Our goal is to correct the weak nature of the supplicant, allowing them to possess the ability to solve their own problems. That is the meaning behind the service club's existence. Looking at the fully charged Heino. Oh wait, Yukino before him, Loi nodded in approval. This was indeed what Shita Yukino would say. Arrogant, yet correct, and carrying a tint of naive idealism. The philosophy is good, very spirited. Loi leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms, his tone becoming slightly more serious. However, classmate Shita, you need to understand one thing. Shuchiing Academy is a place where elites gather. Even when students here encounter difficulties, their pride will not allow them to easily bow their heads and seek help from outsiders. The people you need to help probably aren't as numerous as you imagine. In a place full of favored children of heaven, admitting one is not good enough is harder than killing them. I am very clear on that. Shita Yukino was not discouraged by Loi's words, her gaze remained clear and firm. Even so, I still want to do this. If even those of us with ability choose to stand by and watch, then this world would be too uninteresting. Fine, since you have that resolve. Loi shrugged and said no more. Since the mission was accepted, this club had to get started. his gaze shifted to Shinomiya Kagaya, who had been quietly watching the show from the side. As the student council president, student Shinomiya is extremely busy and certainly doesn't have time to join a club that looks like playing house. Shinomiya Kagaya smiled elegantly without speaking, tacitly agreeing. As for student Fujiwara, Loie glanced at Chika, who was still drawing circles in the corner. Although her brain is a bit strange, she is more than sufficient as a backup to pad the numbers. The service club doesn't need many members anyway. We just need to meet the standard of 5 people nominally so we aren't disbanded, right? Indeed, that is the case. Yukino nodded. If it's just to satisfy regulations, being a nominal member is fine. But I hope the members are people who truly need the changing. Coincidence? Loie snapped his fingers. I think the same way. He walked up to Yukino and held up 2 fingers. What we are looking for are problem members who have serious issues, cannot integrate into normal campus life, and urgently need someone to severely correct their outlook on life. Bringing them in both meets the required number of members and serves as experimental subjects for your teacher man to fish, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Yukino was momentarily stunned, then a glint flashed in her eyes. She instantly understood Loie's idea. Train using the club members first? Turning the club itself into a treatment center was indeed a practical and efficient plan. Mr. Loie, you really are a self-determining teacher, aren't you? Yukino looked at Loie, a faint smile curving her lips. However, this proposal isn't bad. Loie smiled. Problem children? He happened to have 2 ready-made ones. One was the Ahoge sporting king Artoria, who denied herself and wanted to change history. The other was the loser Yanaomi Anna, who looked cute yet willingly allowed herself to be toyed with. If these 2 were put together, plus Yukino, the sharp-tongued instructor, the scene, just thinking about it, felt interesting. Then, let's finalize the personnel issue as soon as possible. I will bring people to the student council office to find you after school tomorrow. After finishing the serious talk, Loie glanced at the time and waved his hand very decisively. Then that's it for now, see you later. With that, Loie turned and left, his movements so dashing he didn't even stir a cloud of dust. As the door clicked shut, the office returned to quiet. But it was only quiet for a second. 2 icy gazes, like infrared targeting scopes, instantly locked onto student Fujiwara in the corner. Hey, Chika! Shinomiya Kagaya smiled gently, holding the student council folding fan in her hand, tapping her palm lightly. It was inconvenient when the teacher was here, but now, can we properly discuss that topic of impure interactions? Student Fujiwara. Yukino also turned around, crossing her arms, as if black lilies had materialized behind her. Regarding my mental health issues, I think it's necessary to conduct an in-depth correctional experiment on you. Ah. Teacher, don't go. Help me. In the student council office, the miserable cries of the cancer of the earth echoed. But this was already irrelevant to Loie, who had long since departed. Meanwhile, Shuchiing Academy, a certain second-year high school class. The atmosphere in the classroom during lunch break was unusually lively, perhaps even a bit chaotic. At the center of the crowd was a girl with golden hair as dazzling as sunlight, and a stubborn ahoge sticking up from her head. Artoria sat upright at her desk, her back perfectly straight, as if she were sitting on the throne of the Knights of the Round Table rather than a wooden school chair. Her meticulous posture, her heroic and striking face, and the natural, imposing righteousness emanating from her made her stand out sharply among the casually behaving JK students around her. And next to her, Yanaomi Anna was waving her arms around, sweating profusely. That. Everyone please make a little space. Classmate Leah needs quiet. Yanaomi Anna was currently acting as her protector. Although she personally wanted to quietly finish her bento, Artoria was simply too popular, and Yanaomi Anna was completely unable to resist the offensive from the surrounding female classmates. Chapter 38, The Popular Artoria. Classmate Leah. Are you really mixed race? Your skin is so fair. Classmate Leah. How do you take care of your hair? That ahoge is so cute, can I touch it? Classmate Leah. Are you free this weekend? We want to invite you to karaoke. The ones surrounding Artoria were exclusively girls. In this era where looks matter, Artoria's handsome female nature style was practically a special attack against high school girls. She was like an Oto Koyaku, male role performer, straight out of the Takarazuka Review. Every glance made the surrounding girls scream uncontrollably. Yanaomi Anna felt like she couldn't hold the line any longer. Woo woo woo. Why has my high school life turned out like this? Yanaomi Anna bit her chopsticks, on the verge of tears. Ever since Loie asked her to look after Artoria, she felt like she had become a human shield. Just then, a slightly bolder girl squeezed forward and asked with a face full of curiosity. Speaking of which, why did classmate Leah suddenly transfer to Shuchiing Academy? Your accent doesn't sound local. Are you a returnee from the UK? Hearing this question, Artoria, who had been silently enduring the crowd, put down the book in her hands. She raised her head, her emerald green eyes crystal clear without any impurity. For this king of knights, lying was an act that violated the path of a knight. Since her master said she was here to experience life, there was no need to hide her motive. Thus, under the gaze of dozens of eyes, Artoria opened her mouth with a solemn expression. I did not come here for the purpose of study. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a strange penetrating power, instantly quieting the previously noisy classroom. I am the master's servant, a knight who has sworn allegiance. Artoria slightly puffed out her chest, her face bearing a sacred radiance called loyalty. My master said my life was too monotonous and hoped I could experience the school life of an ordinary person, to feel what a youth is. Therefore, as a knight, I obeyed my master's command and came. As her voice fell, the entire place fell silent. The lollipop in Yanaomi Anna's mouth dropped onto the desk. It was over. Yanaomi Anna despairingly covered her face. Classmate Leah, such overly Chinibya words were one thing to say at home, but saying them so seriously in class would definitely get her labeled as a weirdo. However, 1 second later. Wah! What erupted wasn't mockery, but even higher-pitched screams. The surrounding girls were not embarrassed at all, instead, hearts popped out of their eyes, and their faces flushed with excitement. Oh my god, Master and Knight? What kind of light novel setting is this? So cool. Saying those lines with such a serious expression is totally cheating. Is this the legendary master-servant play? Classmate Leah is the knight princess here to experience life for her master. So cool. Lady Leah. Do you still need a master? I want to join too. Watching the girls become even more fanatical, Yanaomi Anna was completely stunned. This actually works? Does being good-looking make even Chunibya tendencies a bonus point? This world that values looks should just be destroyed. In the classroom, screams and cheers rose and fell like ocean waves. Facing these female classmates whose eyes were shining with hearts, looking as if they were about to devour her whole, Artoria's face, usually unfazed even when facing thousands of troops, rarely showed a trace of bewilderment. She sat stiffly on the chair, and the ahoge on her head swayed twice in confusion. Is this the etiquette of a modern Japanese high school? Artoria asked silently in her heart. As a knight, she was accustomed to wielding her sword on the battlefield and discussing matters around the round table, but she was completely unaccustomed to being watched by a group of unarmed and overly enthusiastic young girls. However, she quickly regained her composure. Because she remembered the command given to her by her master, Loie. Artoria, go and enjoy your school life. Since it was her master's command, it was absolute. If she failed to respond to this enthusiasm, it would not only be a lapse in knightly demeanor but also a dereliction of her master's order. Thinking of this, Artoria straightened her back and spoke to the surroundings in a solemn tone, as if facing certain death. Thank you all for your kindness. As a newcomer transfer student, if there is anything I do not understand, I ask for your guidance. Wow! So cool. Lady Leah spoke to me. Her voice is so magnetic. What was intended to calm the commotion instead poured oil onto the fire with this serious speech, making the scene even more out of control. Naomi Anna beside her had completely given up resisting by this point. She lay on the desk, watching the scene with no will to live, muttering, "Why do even these official statements cause screams? Does being good-looking allow you to do whatever you want? This world that values looks is too cruel." Finally, the lunch break bell rang. The crowd finally dispersed slightly due to hunger. Artoria breathed a sigh of relief and turned to look at her guard beside her. "Anna, where shall we eat?" "Let's go to Lois' place." Naomi Anna sighed, taking out 2 huge lunch boxes from her school bag. "If we stay in the classroom, neither of us will be able to finish this meal quietly. Besides, I also need to ask Loie what club we should pick for you." Since she was supposed to experience school life, club activities were naturally an essential part. But given Artoria's naturally airheaded combined with the deadly serious personality, ordinary clubs probably couldn't accommodate this great deity. Shachiing Academy, Health Room. When the two pushed the door open, they found the room empty. The lazy man who should have been sitting behind the desk was not there. "It seems Loie hasn't returned yet." Naomi Anna walked familiarly to the sofa and sat down, placing the 2 lunch boxes on the coffee table. At this time, Loie was following behind Fujiwara Chika, heading to the student council to deal with that ridiculous farce about lesbians. "Since Master isn't here, let's eat first." Artoria did not feel uneasy due to her master's absence. Her attention was quickly drawn to the lunch boxes on the coffee table. Those originally serious emerald green eyes were now shining with anticipation. For this king of knights, nothing deserved more respect than food. That's right. That irresponsible Loie is definitely slacking off somewhere again. Naomi Anna grumbled while opening the lid of a lunch box. Instantly, an enticing aroma filled the entire office. Fried chicken nuggets, tamagoyaki, octopus sausages, and a full portion of rice. It had to be said, Naomi Anna was quite capable when it came to eating, although this was usually to comfort her wounded soul. PS 8th Update presented. Chapter 39 The Students Who Had Problems. I'm starting now. The two clasped their hands together. For the next 10 minutes, the only sounds left in the office were the blissful noise of chewing food. Artoria ate very quickly, but her movements were incredibly graceful, as if she wasn't eating a bento box, but a 3 Michelin-star French feast. Naomi Anna, meanwhile, held her cheeks, savoring the joy brought by carbohydrates with an intoxicated expression. Just as the two were about to finish the last piece of fried chicken. Click! The sound of the lock turning echoed. Loie pushed the door open and walked in, looking exhausted. As soon as he entered, he saw the 2 girls happily eating on the sofa, and the entire room filled with the smell of fried chicken. I'm talking to you too. Loie loosened his tie, walked over to sit behind the desk, and looked at them with some helplessness. It's one thing to treat the counseling room like a cafeteria, but you didn't even save a portion for me. Having just gone through a mental marathon named Shiraba in the student council, and having to deal with Fujiwara Chika, whose thought process was so bizarre, Loie felt mentally and physically drained. Because Loie, you weren't here. Naomi Anna swallowed the last bite of rice and said righteously, besides, this is Anna's special bento. If you want some, you have to pay. How about we consider it payment for the previous meal fees? Artoria quickly put down her chopsticks and sat up straight. Master, you have returned. Shall I go to the cafeteria to purchase lunch for you? No need. Loie waved his hand, took a piece of chocolate from the drawer, and popped it into his mouth to replenish his sugar levels. He looked at the rigidly seated Artoria and remembered the important matter at hand. Right, Artoria. Regarding your request to experience club life, I have already scouted a very suitable place for you. Oh. Artoria's eyes lit up, and the ahoge on her head instantly stood straight up. What kind of club is it? The Kendo club? Or the archery club? No matter what kind of martial arts sparring it is, I will not lose. No, it's not a place for fighting and killing. Lowy raised one finger and shook it, a meaningful smile appearing on his face. It's a club designed to cultivate the spirit of service and social adaptability that you need as a modern high school student. Saying that, Lowy turned to look at Yanaomi Anna, who was tidying up her bento box. And you, Yanaomi Anna? You have to join too. Who? Yanaomi Anna paused her actions, pointed at her own nose with a bewildered look. Me too. Why? I'm a firm supporter of the Go Home Club. I want to go eat crepes after school. Protest invalid. Lowy completely ignored her complaint. This is to give your perpetually failing life a slightly higher chance of success. Moreover, as Artoria's friend, you have an obligation to accompany her. Then, Master, what is the name of this club? Artoria asked curiously. Lowy cleared his throat and slowly uttered the name. The Service Club. The air went silent for a second. Artoria nodded, her expression still serious. Service? I see. As a knight, serving my lord and serving the people is inherently my duty. The name of this club perfectly aligns with the spirit of chivalry. I accept. For Saber, the word service often associated with the loyalty of a servant to their master, so she didn't feel anything was wrong with it. However, for Yanaomi Anna, who was deeply influenced by modern internet culture, the meaning of the word was completely twisted. I refuse. Yanaomi Anna jumped up abruptly, crossed her arms, and retreated to the corner with a bright red face. She looked at Lowy with eyes that judged him like trash and protested loudly. Why would the school allow such a club to exist? The Service Club? Isn't that too H? Are we supposed to wear maid outfits to serve tea and pour water for boys? Or are we supposed to do asterisk that asterisk and asterisk that asterisk? Lowy, you really are a pervert. Looking at Yanaomi Anna's richly imaginative expression, Lowy felt a headache coming on. Why was it that the girls in this school all had their brains filled with this kind of garbage? Fujiwara Chika came first, and now Yanaomi Anna followed. Thwack! Lowy walked over without hesitation and lightly tapped Yanaomi Anna's forehead with the side of his hand. Oh! Yanaomi Anna covered her forehead, tears welling up. It's you who is 2H, classmate Yanaomi. Lowy gave her an exasperated look. What kind of nonsense are you thinking about all day? Afterward, Lowy had to patiently repeat Yukino Shita Yukino's high-minded ideals, teach a man to fish, help students in difficulty, and self-improvement. After hearing the explanation, Yanaomi Anna finally realized she had misunderstood. Her face turned even redder this time, out of shame. Oh really? She muttered softly, her gaze shifting uncertainly. Why would you name a club something so easily misinterpreted and not wholesome? Wouldn't a mutual aid club or the volunteer club be better? The name is just a code word, the content is what matters. Lowy didn't want to dwell on this issue. In any case, tomorrow after school, bring Artoria to the activity room in the club building to report. I will send you the location. Yes, Master. Artoria accepted the order without hesitation. Oh, okay. Although Yanaomi Anna was still somewhat reluctant, under Lowy's pressure, she reluctantly agreed. After sending off these two problem children, the mental health office finally regained its long-lost tranquility. Lowy sighed and leaned back in his chair, feeling that being a teacher was more tiring than fighting a demon lord in another world. This school really has hidden masters? He muttered to himself while opening the computer on his desk to pull up the student roster database for Shuqing Academy. As the psychology teacher with the highest access privileges, he could view every student's file. Originally, he just wanted to check if there were any other crossover characters mixed in. The result of this look immediately silenced him. The mouse scroll wheel slid slowly, and familiar names popped up one after another on the screen, followed by lines of suffocating status bars. Soto Kazuma, first year class C, status, deceased. Note, the cause of death was reportedly being scared to death while trying to save a girl who wasn't actually being hit by a tractor. Natsuki Subaru, first year Class B, status, missing. Note, has not returned since going to the convenience store to buy things last week. The police have opened a case, but there are no leads. Kudo Shinichi, second year Class B, status, on extended leave. Note, reportedly got involved in some case after a date at a tropical land amusement park, currently on long-term leave under the pretext of investigating a case abroad. Kujo Jotaro, third year Class D, status, on leave. Note, his mother is seriously ill, so he went to Egypt to find a doctor, return date undetermined. Keikion Norioki, third year Class D, status, on leave. Note, same as above. Chapter 40, for joining the club. Hanma Baki, Class 1E, is status, suspended for incarceration. Note, voluntarily serving time at the Arizona State Prison, that's Black Pentagon, in the United States for unknown reasons, rumored to be to challenge someone. Looking at this student roster that resembled a curse list, Loi's mouth couldn't help but twitch wildly. Good heavens! He supported his forehead with one hand, muttering speechlessly to the empty office. There are far too many delinquent students here. Dead, missing, imprisoned, or off fighting vampires in Egypt. It was a miracle that this Shuchiing Academy hadn't been attacked and destroyed yet. It seems I'll be busy for a while. Loi closed the page and let out a long sigh. However, looking at the bright sunshine outside the window, the corner of his mouth curved up slightly. But precisely because of that, it would be interesting, wouldn't it? Just as Loi was complaining about that outrageous missing persons list, the semi-transparent panel in his vision flickered again, displaying a new line of bold text. Ding! Long-term side quest triggered, The Lost Lambs. Quest description, there are simply too many truant students. For the sake of these students' academic performance, please bring back the students on this list. Current objective, bring back to confirm at least one person. Quest reward, Primo Gems X 1000, special item, Arrow of the Insect, 1 piece. Loi's pupils contracted slightly. 1000 Primo Gems were secondary, the key was the reward that followed, the Arrow of the Insect. That was the sacred object from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, capable of granting stand abilities to people. If the person possessing a stand used it, they could even evolve into Gold Experience Requiem. Even an ordinary arrow was an invaluable divine artifact. Accept. Loi clicked accept without hesitation. However, he wasn't in a hurry to get up and search for the missing Natsuki Subaru or that imprisoned Hanma Baki. Having been in this world for a few days, Loi had long discovered a crucial mechanism. This was a game world. Based on his tests over the past 2 days, and the occasional information revealed by the player panel, the world's time flow and plot trigger mechanisms were quite interesting. As long as he didn't actively push the main storyline or trigger key nodes, the world's timeline would remain in a subtle state of looping or stagnation. It was just like playing a Chinese paladin back then. You could choose not to take the boat away, but instead grind Li Xiaoyao into a max-level sword god right there at 10 Mile Slope. Since that's the case, I have even less reason to rush off and court death. Loi leaned back in his chair, fingers tapping lightly on the desk, his mind working rapidly. Although the plot involving Tokyo Jujutsu High was urgent, as long as he didn't return and trigger the prerequisite missions for the Shibuya incident or the Culling game, Itadori Yuji and the others would just continue their daily training at the school. Since Loi now held the initiative to exploit the bug, why not utilize this mechanism? I've decided. I'll settle down here at Shuchiing for about a year or two first. Loi stroked his chin, a faint smile of cautious survivals appearing on his lips. Once I level up, and after letting Itadori and Fushiguro Megumi study at Jujutsu High for a few more years, let's wait about 2 or 3 years before fighting Sukuna. By then, maybe Gojo Satoru really can win. I'll just be a 10 Mile Slope sword god here, first completely fleece all the wool. Oh wait, all the Primo Gems from Shuchiing. Having made up his mind, Loi closed the mission panel with a clear conscience. Isn't it just about finding people? No rush, I'll let them stew for a month first. Anyway, Natsuki Subaru and Soto Kazuma are in another world, and Hanma Baki, that guy is probably living more comfortably in prison than outside. Only Jotaro and Keikiine are relatively anxious, but as long as he doesn't advance the stage, the story progress will be stuck there, so no need to hurry. 3 days later. Afternoon, after school at the club building. The afterglow of the setting sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows down the corridor. Loie walked at the very front, followed by 4 students of various shapes and sizes, marching mightily towards the secluded classroom at the end of the hall, the service club room. He pushed the door open. Yukino Shita Yukino was sitting upright behind the somewhat old long table, holding a novel she liked. Hearing the door open, Yukino Shita slowly raised her head, her cool gaze sweeping over the group entering. Although 5 people need to be gathered. Yukino Shita Yukino closed her book, her gaze sharp as a blade, sweeping across the 4 people behind Loie one by one, but the samples you brought, Loie-sensei, all seem quite individual. Loie walked to the side with a smile, pulled out a chair, and sat down like an onlooker watching a show, gesturing to introduce them one by one. Come, let's get acquainted. First, these 2, you should have met them. My servant, Artoria Pendragon. And Yanaomi Anna, whose specialties are never gaining weight no matter how much she eats and 30 years as a professional loser. Artoria nodded politely, pleased to meet you, classmate Yukino Shita. The refreshments here are quite good. Yanaomi Anna, meanwhile, held a bag of chips, protesting vaguely with food in her mouth, who is a professional loser. I haven't lost yet. And why is my specialty listed as eating? Yukino Shita ignored Yanaomi Anna's protest and shifted her gaze to the 2 behind. Next is this one. Loie pointed to the boy standing at the back, whose deadfish eyes seemed to have seen through the mortal world, emanating an aura of don't get involved around him. Hashiman Hikigaya, Class 2F. His specialties are self-destruction and writing essays that make people want to tear them up. Hashiman Hikigaya pulled at the corner of his mouth, flashing an extremely perfunctory smile. Hey, teacher, what kind of introduction is that? This is bullying, isn't it? Can I report you to the Board of Education? And finally, this one. Loie looked at the black-haired, straight-haired girl huddled in the corner, who was constantly lowering her head, her body trembling slightly, not even daring to look up at anyone. Miko Yotsuya, 2nd year. Her specialty is, well, she has exceptionally good eyesight. Good eyesight. Yukino Shita Yukino frowned slightly, clearly not understanding the value of that specialty. Regardless, including the original Yukino Shita Yukino, the 5 people were now assembled. Loie clapped his hands and announced. All right, I've brought everyone here for you. Starting today, the service club is officially fully staffed. Next is club activity time. You all set your own rules. If anyone has any objections, speak up now. As soon as the words fell, a hand was lazily raised. I have an objection. Hashiman Hikigaya, sporting those signature deadfish eyes, stated flatly, I don't know how you found out about me, teacher, but I refuse to join this club. A place brimming with the aura of normies and inexplicable positive energy is not suitable for a loner like me. Besides, Hashiman Hikigaya paused, then dropped a bombshell with a tone of entitlement. I already have a girlfriend. I need to spend time with her after school, so I don't have time for club activities. The air instantly fell silent. P.S. This book is currently in the recommendation verification period. Please give lots of support, requesting reviews, adding to bookshelves, and following updates. Once the verification period passes, I will increase the update frequency again. Chapter 41, Hashiman's Girlfriend. Who? Anna Yanaomi dropped the potato chip in her hand onto the floor. Even Yukino Shita Yukino's eternally icy expression showed a slight crack. Even Artoria stopped chewing and looked in surprise at the boy who looked like he had zero appeal to the opposite sex. Loie also raised an eyebrow and asked with feigned surprise. Hachiman Hikigaya, although I know there are many weirdos in this school, there's no point in telling a lie that's so easily seen through. You have a girlfriend? Where is she? In a 2D world. It's not a lie. Hachiman Hikigaya pushed up his non-slipping glasses, and a strange, blissful expression tinged with pink bubbles actually appeared on his face. We've been together since our first year of high school. She is gentle, cute, and understanding, an angel who is the only one in this world who can understand me. Her name is Saika Totsuka. Looking at Hachiman Hikigaya's expression that seemed to say, "You mortals cannot comprehend true love," Loie suddenly remembered something. In this heavily modified crossover game world, some settings would be forcibly corrected or gender-bent by the system. In the original work, although Saika Totsuka was a boy, he was cuter than most girls, and his appeal to Hachiman Hikigaya was incomparably strong. And in this game world, could it be that he truly turned into a girl? Or perhaps, even if he remained a boy, gender was no longer an obstacle in Hachiman Hikigaya's eyes? I see. Loie nodded solemnly, accepting the setting. Is that so? Although I haven't met her, judging by the name, she must be a lovely person. HMPH, naturally. Hachiman Hikigaya snorted proudly. However, precisely because you have a girlfriend, you need to join the service club even more. Loie abruptly changed the subject, revealing a devilish smile. Because Saika Totsuka seems to have joined the tennis club's intensive training recently and won't have time to accompany you after school. To prevent you from developing vengeful thoughts due to loneliness, I've decided to keep you here. TCH. Hachiman Hikigaya clicked his tongue but offered no further rebuttal. One troublesome person down. Loie turned his gaze to the last person. Miko Yotsuya, who had been huddled in the corner. At this moment, the girl's condition was highly abnormal. Her face was as pale as paper, her forehead covered in fine cold sweat, and her hands gripped her skirt so tightly that her knuckles had turned white from exertion. Her large eyes, filled with tears, darted around frantically but dared not fixate on any single direction. Miko Yotsuya's voice trembled, carrying a hint of a sob. Teacher, I should go first. I suddenly remembered I didn't turn off the gas at home. I have an urgent matter to attend to and must leave. Saying that, she turned to pull the doorknob. Her movements were so flustered as if a ferocious beast were chasing her from behind. Wait a moment, Miko Yotsuya. Yukino Shita Yukino looked at her with some confusion. You look very unwell? Do you need to go to the infirmary? No. I just need to get out of here. Miko Yotsuya shook her head desperately, tears almost falling. Only Loie knew what she was afraid of at this moment. He narrowed his eyes slightly, his gaze passing over everyone's heads to look toward the corner of the activity room ceiling. Up there. An utterly nauseating thing was hanging upside down. It possessed a humanoid body but seemed constructed from rotting flesh. Its limbs were twisted at bizarre angles, and its long neck hung down like a snake. Its face, which had only a mouth and no eyes, was constantly dripping black mucus. At this moment, the thing was hovering less than 10 centimeters above Yukino Shita Yukino's head. It opened its large mouth full of sharp teeth and emitted a piercing whisper, like fingernails scraping a blackboard, audible only to specific individuals. Can you see me? Can you see me? This was a vengeful spirit. Moreover, it was the type of vengeful spirit from the world of another. They followed a set of rigid and terrifying rules. As long as you couldn't see them, they were just harmless to you. But if you showed that you saw them, they would instantly become extremely aggressive and cling to you until your death. Miko Yotsuya lived in constant terror precisely because she possessed the spiritual sight that allowed her to see these things. She was desperately trying to hypnotize herself. This is an illusion, that is I cannot see it, I cannot see it. But the spirit's head was almost touching Yukino Shita's hair. The visual impact was too strong, making her instinctively want to flee. Loey glanced at Artoria, who was drinking tea. As a heroic spirit, Artoria had clearly seen the entity above her head. She frowned slightly, her hand already resting motionlessly in the empty air, seemingly ready to summon the sword of promised victory at any moment. In the judgment of the mysterious side, a vengeful spirit of this level wouldn't even count as cannon fodder to a heroic spirit. But the problem was, to ordinary people, this thing was invisible. Loey had no intention of letting Artoria act directly. After all, with one normal attack from Saber, half of the ceiling might be destroyed. These low-level vengeful spirits were actually harmless most of the time, and there were exorcists specifically tasked with managing them. But now, Miko Yotsuya was frightened to the point of collapse. If this problem child was to be kept, if she wasn't reassured, she might not even dare to come to school in the future. Sigh. Loey sighed and stood up from his chair. He walked straight towards Yukino Shita Yukino, or rather, toward the vengeful spirit hanging above her head. Teacher? Yukino Shita Yukino looked at Loey, who had suddenly approached, with confusion. Loey ignored Yukino Shita and reached out his hand directly. Under Miko Yotsuya's extremely terrified gaze, her pupils trembling. Slap! Loey's palm, precisely and casually, as if swatting a fly, landed squarely on the spirit's drooling face. Slap! This crisp sound actually did not create much disturbance on the physical plane. But in a dimension invisible to ordinary people, it sounded like a heavy hammer striking rotten copper and broken iron, emitting a grating shattering noise. The terrifying vengeful spirit hanging from the ceiling, dripping black saliva directly over Yukino Shita Yukino's head, didn't even have time to let out a scream. Its head was instantly twisted and deformed, as if struck head-on by a speeding truck, then with a poof, like a burst balloon, it disintegrated into countless tiny black dust particles and completely dissipated in the air. There was no gore, no splattering mucus. Only a faint wisp of smoke, like dispersing dust, vanished in the afterglow of the setting sun. Chapter 42, Club Activities, Decided by Oneself. Loey calmly withdrew his hand, as if he were someone who had just swatted a mosquito, casually dusting off his palms where nothing existed. Done. He turned around and looked at Yotsuya Miko, who was shrinking in the corner, completely dumbstruck. At this moment, Miko's large eyes, brimming with tears, were wide open, her mouth slightly agape. The entire person seemed to have been paused. 1 second, it was hellish despair, the next second, the monster tormenting her nerves was slapped away. This intense sense of contrast caused her brain to slightly overload. Loey looked at her, wearing his usual smile tinged with laziness and playfulness, and asked seriously. So, how about now, classmate Yotsuya? I have already cleaned up that environmental sanitation here. Given this premise, are you willing to join the service club and become one of our members? This wasn't just an invitation to join the club. In Yotsuya Miko's ears, this was practically the sound of salvation sent from a deity. The handsome figure from that slap instantly rose in her eyes, as if radiating golden holy light, 1,000,000 times more reliable than the clay statues in the shrine that only took money without doing any work. How could this be a teacher? This was clearly a living guardian deity. As long as she stayed by this person's side, even those terrifying things would be casually swatted away like flies. The instinct for survival instantly overwhelmed all shyness and social anxiety. Yotsuya Miko suddenly straightened her body, the expression on her face changing visibly from terror to determination, even carrying a fanatic piety. Please, let me join. The girl's voice echoed in the quiet activity room, trembling with a broken tone. Not just joining. If possible, please let me come every day. I also want to contribute strength to the school, to my classmates, and to this beautiful world. I beg you, Teacher Loey. Watching Yotsuya Miko, whose expression had instantly changed, practically wanting to hug Loey's leg, the others in the activity room reacted differently. Hashiman Hikigaya pushed up his glasses that hadn't slipped down, his dead fish eyes filled with confusion. Did something just happen? From his perspective, Teacher Loie had just inexplicably walked up to Yukino Shita Yukino, slapped the air, and then the girl who had been rambling about wanting to go home suddenly wanted to join the club as if injected with adrenaline. Is this the so-called suspension bridge effect? Or some secret code between normies that I don't understand? Hachiman Hikigaya grumbled internally, waving at the air can win a girl's heart. Is this a new era PUA technique? Terrifying. On the other side, Artoria silently picked up her teacup and took a small sip. Well done, master, she nodded secretly in her heart. As a servant, she naturally perceived the fluctuation of spiritual power in that instant. Such a low-level, vengeful spirit was indeed like an ant to the master. The master choosing to act personally instead of letting her draw her sword was clearly to protect the integrity of this classroom. Worthy of being a meticulous master. As for Yukino Shita Yukino, the Ice Queen Club president, who was protected yet completely unaware, was currently staring thoughtfully at Loie's hand. Although she couldn't see evil spirits, as the daughter of a prominent family, she wasn't entirely ignorant of the other side of the world. She had heard some rumors circulating within the great families about onmyoji, exorcism and sorcery. Combined with Yotsuya Miko's reaction, which clearly showed she had seen something unclean, and Loie's action that seemed to have scattered a physical entity. It seems this new advisory teacher is not just an ordinary educator. Yukino Shita Yukino re-evaluated Loie's danger level in her mind. A jujitsu sorcerer? An investigator from a secret government department? Or perhaps a demon hunter for hire in the civilian world? Whichever it was, it indicated that this man was not as carefree as he appeared on the surface. Interesting. Yukino lightly closed the paperback in her hand, a faint, almost imperceptible curve appearing at the corner of her mouth. She had initially thought Loie became a teacher solely based on his family's influence, but now it seemed this psychology teacher might be very reliable. As for Yanaomi Anna, she grumbled internally, Loie is already a teacher, yet he still uses his looks to fool young girls. But then again, he really is too handsome. However, for this foodie, as long as she didn't have to work and had snacks, she didn't care what club she joined. As for Loie's action of slapping the air just now, she didn't understand it at all, it was probably some kind of superpower thing. All right. Seeing that no one had any objections, Loie nodded with satisfaction. He walked to the lecture stand, the foremost position in the activity room, clapped his hands, drawing everyone's gaze. The setting sun cast his shadow long upon the blackboard, stretching out a lengthy silhouette. Since everyone is present, I declare the service club's first activity officially started. Loie's voice was steady and powerful, as if he were about to announce a critical mission to save the world. Everyone subconsciously sat up straighter, even Hachiman Hikigaya slightly lifted his eyelids. Then, Loie waved his hand, dismissed. The crowd collapsed. Since there are no requests, engage in free activity, Loie stated as a matter of course. This is the service club's principle, when no lost lambs seek help, we are just a group of idle people with nothing to do. All right, I'm going over there to sleep. Call me if anything comes up. Saying that, Loie actually walked to the single sofa by the window, found a comfortable position, lay down, casually picked up a magazine to cover his face, and began resting his eyes. Yukino Shita Yukino sighed, seemingly having given up hope regarding this advisory teacher's casual demeanor. She reopened her book, elegantly picked up her teacup, and entered reading mode. The entire activity room instantly fell into a bizarre silence. Artoria thought for a moment, stood up, and walked to the chair next to Loie, sitting down like the most loyal knight guarding her monarch's nap. Yotsuya Miko, however, looked around nervously. Although that vengeful spirit had been eliminated, she still felt this place wasn't entirely safe. After hesitating for a long time, she finally mustered her courage, moving quietly like a startled little rabbit next to the sofa where Loie was. Teacher? Yotsuya Miko squatted down, her voice as thin as a thread. That thing just now, was it really eliminated like that? Will it appear again in the future? What if I see one at home? Loie's muffled voice came from under the magazine. Endure it for now. I will handle the follow-up, and of course, I will teach you so you have the ability to deal with these vengeful spirits yourself. Hearing this, Yotsuya Miko let out a long sigh of relief, as if she had obtained some kind of talisman. Chapter 43, God's New Email. Thank you, teacher. She obediently found a small stool closest to Loie and sat down. She took out her textbook from her school bag and pretended to study, but in reality, her eyes dared not leave Loie by more than a meter. On the other side. Since there's nothing else, I think I'll get going now. Hashiman Hikigaya stood up, slung his school bag over his shoulder, his movements fluid and natural. Ayaka is waiting for me at the tennis court. Even though the teacher said she was busy, as her boyfriend, handing her water from the sidelines is also a form of self-cultivation. After speaking, without waiting for Loie's reply, the boy, who was named the Loner but was actually a normie reserve, vanished from the doorway like a lurking assassin. In the activity room, only Yukino Shita, who was reading, Loie, who was sleeping, Artoria, who was on high alert, Miko, who was trembling, and Yanaomi Anna, who looked utterly bewildered, remained. It's over already. Yanaomi Anna had a pocky stick in her mouth. She looked left and right, her face filled with disbelief. What is everyone doing? I thought this was a club activity. Why is everyone doing their own thing? Shouldn't we all be sitting together, discussing topics about youth, or playing board games? Yukino looked up, her cool gaze piercing through her bangs to look at Anna. Yanaomi-san, I think you have misunderstood the positioning of the service club. She closed her book and explained in a flat tone, we are a club that accepts commissions and solves problems. Since no client has shown up right now, everyone is naturally free to do as they please. Having said that, Yukino Shita paused, her eyes, which seemed capable of seeing into people's hearts, narrowing slightly. Or perhaps? Yanaomi-san, do you have some unspeakable trouble you wish to entrust us to solve? For instance, confusion regarding interpersonal relationships? Or perhaps, an issue concerning a certain childhood friend? Yanaomi Anna stiffened as if her tail had been stepped on. She instinctively wanted to retort, wanted to say, I don't have any problems, wanted to say, my relationship with Hakamada Susuke is great. But the words caught in her throat and refused to come out. In her mind, the image of the person she grew up with, Hakamada Susuke, uncontrollably surfaced. And the pink-haired girl who always appeared smiling next to Susuke, Himegumi Karen. The two of them were already in a romantic relationship. What was she in comparison? If it were the old me, I would definitely rush up and make a scene, or forcefully insert myself into their relationship. Anna thought bitterly to herself. But immediately, the words Loie had spoken to her before poured onto her heart like ice-cold rainwater. That is mutual, heartfelt pure love. If you force yourself in, you just become an annoying stray dog on the roadside, and you'll get kicked away if you stick around. A stray dog. Yanaomi Anna lowered her head, looking at the remaining half-bag of pocky in her hand. If she didn't disturb them, at least she could maintain some semblance of dignity. If she insisted on squeezing in the end, she would probably just become a despised loser. Forget it. After a long pause, Yanaomi Anna shook her head and forced a signature, carefree smile onto her face. I don't have any particular troubles. This is fine too. Really? She tore open a new bag of chips, making a crunch-crunch sound, as if trying to drown out some emotion inside her with the noise. As long as I have snacks, I'm happy. Looking at Anna's forced smile, Yukino Shita didn't expose her. She just nodded faintly, is that so? If you think so, then that's fine. She returned to reading, though the movement of turning the page was slightly slower than usual. The first day of the service club activity ended in this strange yet harmonious atmosphere. The setting sun sank below the horizon, dyeing the entire Shuchiing Academy in an orange-red hue. The dismissal bell rang. Everyone went their separate ways. Lowy stretched, bid farewell to Artoria, who was going out to eat with Naomi Anna, and returned alone to his detached house. After a simple wash-up, Lowy lay spread-eagled on the soft bed, staring blankly at the ceiling for a while. Sediment. Deceitful way. 10-mile slope sword god. He muttered to himself, his consciousness sinking into his mind. With a slight movement of his will, the pale blue player panel reappeared on his retina. Besides the long-term quest, Lost Lamb still hanging there. In an inconspicuous corner of the panel, the icon symbolizing the system mailbox, which was usually dark, had somehow popped up a small, vivid red dot. You have one unread email. Looking at the red dot in the corner, Lowy's face darkened. Receiving an email at this hour, besides that unscrupulous deities who threw him into this world and then ignored him, Lowy couldn't think of a second candidate. Who? Lowy took a deep breath, prepared himself mentally, and reached out a finger to tap the red dot. The content of the email was quite concise, even carrying the arrogant tone unique to that goddess, as if it could penetrate the screen. To Minnow Lowy. Oh my, oh my? Has someone really been transmigrated for this long, and their panel stats are still this low? Minnow Lowy, although I knew you were trash, I didn't expect you to be trash to this extent tilde. To prevent you from dying randomly in this dangerous world, I, the great god, have mercifully prepared an exclusive training dungeon for you. Even a hopeless minnow like you, if you cry and struggle hard enough inside, you should be able to get a little stronger, right? Don't thank me, Minnow Lowy tilde. From the cutest goddess. After reading the email, several blue veins instantly popped out on Lowy's forehead. Although it was just text, he could almost see the silver-haired, red-eyed, petite but malicious goddess. She was currently floating in mid-air, looking down at him with an expression of looking at garbage, a classic impertinent girl, mocking smile plastered on her lips. My fists are hard. Lowy clenched his fists. My fists are hard. If that goddess appeared before him right now, Lowy swore he would let her know what a correction fist was. However, anger aside, as a mature adult, and a veteran player, Lowy clearly understood when to bow his head. Although the goddess's mouth was venomous enough to make one want to tape it shut, the things she provided were genuine benefits. Forget it. For the sake of the reward, I'll forgive you this time. Lowy snorted coldly and closed the email that raised his blood pressure. Afterward, his gaze fell upon a newly unlocked module on the system panel. Training Dungeon. Description: an alternate dimension specially opened to improve the player's utterly pathetic base stats. Here, you can fully sweat and bleed. Currently unlocked dungeon, Baboon Island, difficulty. Chapter 44, Landing on the Island, instant kill. Baboon Island? Lowy raised an eyebrow. Sounds like some sort of zoo simulator. He didn't rush in immediately. Instead, he first pulled up his status panel, wanting to see just how low that tiny bits the goddess mentioned actually was. A semi-transparent blue light screen unfolded before his eyes. Player, Lowy. Race, human. Age, 18. Stamina, 45. Strength, 43. Speed, 47. Energy, 41. Magic power, 4710. Primogem, 1440. Active skills, skill, touch of absorption. Passive skill, super luck. Looking at these figures, Lowy stroked his chin. Indeed, his current stats were still too pathetic. Even with Artoria serving as his servant, that wasn't his own strength. Lowy really needed to improve his base attributes. This training instance was clearly designed for him to hone his combat skills and raise his base attributes. Fine then, let me see what this so-called Baboon Island is all about. Lowy hesitated no longer. With a thought, he tapped his finger on the Baboon Island icon. Notification: this instance can be entered 3 times per day. 3R3. Enter now. Yes. The next second, Lowy only felt the scene before him distort. The familiar ceiling of his bedroom instantly vanished. A dizzying sensation of weightlessness washed over him, immediately followed by the feeling of solid ground beneath his feet. When his vision cleared, Lowy realized he was no longer in that cozy single-family home. The surroundings were filled with a thick mist carrying the scent of brine and decaying earth. The sky was a gloomy grey-black, the sun was nowhere in sight, only heavy, oppressive dark clouds pressing down overhead, creating an extremely suffocating feeling. This was a desolate island. At this moment, Lowy was standing on a gravel beach. And before him lay a deep, dark forest of withered trees that looked like anything could leap out at any moment. More striking was the boundary between the beach and the forest, which was dotted with countless broken swords and blades stuck into the ground. Some were already heavily rusted, others were merely half-blades remaining. They stood like tombstones, silently recounting the fierce battles that had taken place here. Current location, safe zone, spawn point. The system's prompt helpfully appeared. This atmosphere, why did it suddenly turn so grim? Lowy couldn't help but mutter. 1 second he was enjoying club life in a slice-of-life anime, the next he was fast-forwarded straight into the set of Dark Souls or Sekiro. This was too jarring. However, now that he was here, there was no reason to retreat. Lowy stretched his wrist and fixed his gaze on a long sword stuck in the ground not far from him. Although it was quite rusty, the blade still gleamed coldly, looking usable. Clang! He walked over, gripped the hilt with one hand, and pulled hard. With a grating sound of metal scraping against rock, the long sword was in his hand. Although Lowy had never systematically studied swordsmanship, his strength of 43 made wielding this heavy sword feel effortless. The feel is decent. Lowy swung it twice, creating a whistling rush of wind. With a weapon in hand, his courage grew. It's just a baboon. Even a mutated baboon, could it be scarier than a human wielding modern weaponry? Holding this confidence befitting the apex primate, Lowy carried the sword and strode into the mist-shrouded forest. However, this confidence lasted for less than 5 minutes. Rustle, rustle. From the depths of the forest came a strange sound of footsteps. It wasn't the sound of a beast running on all fours, but the sound of something walking forward alternately on 2 feet, like a human, crushing dry branches. Lowy stopped, looking warily ahead. The mist gradually dispersed. A dark figure slowly walked out. The moment Lowy clearly saw the figure, his expression froze. It was indeed a baboon. However, this baboon was wearing somewhat tattered human clothing, and its face held an indifferent and stern expression. Most importantly, it was holding a rapier even larger than the one Lowy held. Squeak! The baboon saw Lowy. It didn't roar and pounce like a normal wild beast. Instead, it held the sword in one hand with extreme human-like composure, shifted its body sideways, and struck an extremely standard, even elegant, starting stance for a rapier. In those eyes, full of sentience, there was no wildness, but the challenge of a martial artist. As if saying, "Come, weakling named human." Lowy's mouth twitched. Are you kidding me? Even monkeys these days have martial ethics. Although he was complaining, Lowy didn't back down. Since the opponent had adopted a fighting stance and invited a battle, how could a player refuse a challenge from an NPC? Let's test it out then. Lowy took a deep breath, relying on his high stats, and charged forward with both hands gripping the sword in a swift dash. No fancy techniques, just a pure, mountain-splitting chop. The explosion of 43 strength made this strike heavy and powerful, carrying a whistling wind pressure, aiming straight for the baboon's head. However, facing this fierce attack, the baboon didn't even blink. Just as the blade was about to hit its body, clang! A crisp sound of metal striking metal rang out. The baboon merely lifted the rapier in its hand slightly, flicking its wrist with extreme dexterity. An extremely bizarre force traveled down the blade. Lowy only felt a shock through his hand, and his powerful downward strike was directly deflected to the side. Block? Deflection? Before Loey could react, a cold glint flashed in the baboon's eyes. Its figure rushed forward like a phantom. The rapier in its hand transformed into a silver lightning bolt, thrusting directly at Loey's throat. Fast! Too fast! This wasn't a speed achievable through brute force, this was technique refined through countless trials. Phut! Blood splattered. Loey felt a chill in his throat, and his vision instantly spun. In the last second before his consciousness cut out, the image he saw was the baboon retracting its sword, and even giving him an extremely disdainful middle finger. Who? Loey suddenly snapped his eyes open, gasping for breath. Cold sweat instantly soaked his back. The icy sensation of a blade piercing his throat seemed to linger in his nerve endings, making him instinctively clutch his neck. Not dead. He looked around in a daze. It wasn't the depths of the forest, nor was it that battlefield littered with corpses. He was back on the initial gravel beach, the safe zone marked by the system. The sea breeze still carried a briny smell, blowing against his face, the dark clouds overhead were still oppressive. Loey looked down at his system panel. You have died. This training evaluation, abysmal. Remaining instance attempts, 2 or 3. P.S. Everyone can guess who got the protagonist's first kill. The person who got the protagonist's first kill first in the drafts has appeared. Of course, you probably won't guess who it is. Chapter 45, Another Confrontation. Loey stared blankly at the sky, his entire being sinking into a philosophical moment of existential doubt. He lost? And it was a crushing defeat. From the clash to his death, had it not even taken 10 moves? No, strictly speaking, the opponent only used 1 move. Block, counterattack, and then he was dead. That baboon hadn't even shifted its footing by a single inch. What kind of goddamn game experience is this? Loey couldn't help but jump up from the ground, pointing at the gloomy island and yelling. Isn't my story supposed to be a light-hearted romantic comedy? Why did it suddenly turn into a hardcore Souls-like game? What is up with that baboon? Was that swordsmanship serious? A swordsman-level baboon. Despite his cursing. Once he calmed down, Loey looked at the ruins, the sword stuck in the ground, and the ridiculously strong swordsman baboon. A chilling speculation gradually took shape in his mind. A gloomy ancient castle island. Ruins filled with battle scars. A baboon that can imitate human swordsmanship. Isn't this the island where the world's strongest swordsman from One Piece, Dracul Mihawk, resides, Kuraigana Island? Loey gasped, sucking in a sharp breath. He finally understood why this dungeon was called Baboon Island. What lived here were not ordinary baboons, but human imitators. They possessed extremely high intelligence and learning ability, having observed warfare for a long time and learned human weapon usage. And after Mihawk settled here, the object of imitation for these baboons became the man standing at the pinnacle of the world's swordsmanship. In other words, the swordsmanship used by the baboon that instantly killed Loey just now was a monkey version of Mihawk's swordsmanship. Does this mean Mihawk himself is probably in the ancient castle at the center of this island right now, drinking red wine? Thinking of this, Loey's heart thumped twice. That was Mihawk. If he could meet him, even learn a move or 2 from him. But the next second, Loey vigorously shook his head, throwing that unrealistic fantasy out of his mind. Stop dreaming, Loey. He gave a self-mocking laugh. I can't even beat one of the monkeys guarding his front door, and I want to meet Mihawk. I'd probably be chopped into meat paste by these monkeys before I even reached the castle. In this dungeon, strength was the only hard currency. Without strength, he didn't even qualify to meet the big boss. However, Loey turned around, looking toward the deep forest. The shock and confusion in his eyes gradually faded, replaced by the competitive desire of a player who had been provoked. Since it's a dungeon, it's meant to be farmed. Loey bent down and pulled out another katana from the ground that was still reasonably sharp. This time, he didn't rush in recklessly. He replayed the movements of the baboon from moments ago repeatedly in his mind. That starting stance, the technique for generating force, the timing for blocking. I have touch of absorption, I have super high magic power, and a body 4 times stronger than a normal person. I refuse to believe it. Lowy gripped the hilt of the blade in his hand, his knuckles turning slightly white from the force. He took a deep breath, set his steps, and walked once more toward the place that had made him suffer. His retreating figure was resolute, carrying a tragic air reminiscent of the wind whistles mournfully across the Yi River. The hero departs, never to return. Of course, the main reason was, I still have 2 more lives left today, so I might as well farm it. Damn monkey, clean your neck and wait. I was careless last time, I didn't dodge. But this time, I've seen through your attack pattern. I'm here for revenge, not to deliver myself. At the edge of the forest, Lowy, holding a long sword picked up from the ground, once again stood at the spot where he had suffered his first kill since transmigration. And across from him, the baboon, wearing a tattered human vest and wielding a rapier, was sitting on a moss-covered rock, meticulously wiping the blade in its hand with a scrap of cloth. Hearing the footsteps, the baboon stopped what it was doing. It slowly raised its head. In its pair of extremely intelligent, pale yellow eyes, a trace of confusion surfaced in a manner that was remarkably human. Squeak! It tilted its head, seemingly confirming something. In its memory, or rather, its simple cognition, this weak human before it should have been silenced by its sword just a few minutes ago. The feeling of that sword strike was solid, the sensation of severing the trachea and carotid artery would never lie. But now, this man was not only standing there alive and kicking, but there wasn't even a scar left on his neck. However, a baboon was still just a baboon. Even though it possessed extremely high intelligence and had even learned the superficial aspects of the great swordsman's technique, it lacked the ability to deeply contemplate philosophical questions like resurrection. It only knew one thing. Since he didn't die completely, killing him again wouldn't hurt. This human was pitifully weak anyway, killing him once or twice was as simple as trimming roadside weeds for the baboon. Clang! The baboon casually tossed aside the rag it was using to clean its sword, performed a beautiful sword flourish with one hand, and once again adopted that elegant and deadly starting stance. The contempt in its eyes was like that of a powerful swordsman. Heh! Lowy looked at the monkey's arrogant attitude and couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth into a cold sneer. Don't be too arrogant, you brute. I was careless last time and didn't dodge. But this time, I have seen through your attack pattern. The so-called players were creatures who possessed infinite room for trial and error. Who? Lowy regulated his breathing, holding the longsword horizontally before his chest. This time, he did not charge in rashly. He waited. Almost simultaneously. One human, one baboon. They moved at the same time in this desolate land littered with sword fragments. There was no longer the overwhelming disparity in strength like last time. The instant the rapier in the baboon's hand stabbed out like a viper, Lowy's pupils contracted sharply. His body instinctively shifted a tiny angle to the left. Clang! Sparks flew. The longsword in Lowy's hand precisely parried the fatal thrust. Although the immense force still numbed his hand, he blocked it. Squeak! A flicker of surprise crossed the baboon's eyes. It clearly hadn't expected this human, who had been like a wooden stake moments ago, to suddenly keep up with its speed. But the battle didn't allow it time to be surprised. The moment the block succeeded, Lowy used the rebound force, letting his longsword slide along to aim directly for the baboon's abdomen. This move was not flashy, it could even be called somewhat clumsy. But this was the optimized solution Lowy had devised after his body memorized the baboon's force trajectory in the instant he died previously. The baboon was forced to take a backward step, bringing its rapier back to defend. This retreat instantly reversed the initiative from offense to defense. The turn-based game is over. Now it's time for real-time action. Chapter 46, The Victor, Lowy, the baboon horde. Lowy let out a low shout, his 43 points of strength and 47 points of speed being squeezed to their absolute limit at this moment. He stopped thinking about complex sword techniques and instead pushed his intuition as a player to the extreme. Slash, chop, thrust, stab. Although his movements were still somewhat stiff, and his posture was not as elegant as that baboon imitating some unknown swordsman. However, Lowy was improving. Improving at a staggering speed. Clang! 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 The dense sound of metal clashing echoed at the edge of the forest, rapid like rain hitting banana leaves. 10 moves. 20 moves. 50 moves. Lowy felt his lungs burning as if on fire, sweat streaming from his forehead into his eyes, causing a stinging sensation. But his spirit was more excited than ever before. He could feel the sword in his hand gradually becoming an extension of his body. Those obscure and difficult to understand techniques for generating force were being forcefully memorized by his body through repeated life and death collisions. This was the terrifying aspect of the player template. As long as there was enough experience value, one could level up rapidly. The baboon grew increasingly alarmed the more it fought. It realized that this human before it was becoming troublesome at a speed visible to the naked eye. From initially only being able to barely parry, to later being able to exchange blows, and now, it was even being forced to change its stance to defend. After 100 rounds. Ha! Lowy gasped for breath, his chest heaving violently. The baboon opposite him was also not feeling well, its normally smooth fur was soaked with sweat, and the hand gripping the sword was no longer as steady as a mountain as it was at the start. Both sides backed away one step with extreme tacit understanding, creating distance. They stared at each other. Silence. Only the rustling sound of the wind passing through the leaves could be heard. This was a contest of equals. Both stamina and spirit had reached their breaking point. The next move would be the moment to decide the victor. There was no countdown, nor was there a referee. The moment a falling leaf touched the ground. Boom! 2 figures exploded forward simultaneously. The baboon let out a sharp roar, and the rapier in its hand transformed into a silver stream of light. This was the strongest attack it could unleash currently, the sword of gentleness imitated from the unknown swordsman. And Lowy gripped the sword with both hands, his gaze fierce, pouring all his strength into the blade, meeting the attack without reservation. Die! They flashed past each other. Time seemed to freeze at this moment. Phut! Phut! 2 muffled sounds of blades entering flesh rang out almost simultaneously. Lowy and the baboon stood back to back, maintaining their sword-striking posture. 1 second later. Thud! Thud! Both fell to the ground at the same time. The baboon's abdomen was sliced open by a massive gash, blood gushing out, its internal organs clearly visible. But Lowy was worse off. A large hole pierced through his chest, his heart nearly shredded, and blood instantly stained the ground beneath him red. Squeak, squeak! The baboon lay on the ground, looking up at the oppressive dark clouds in the sky, a smile of relief belonging to a swordsman appearing on its lips. It had lost, but it had also won. Mutual destruction. For a swordsman, this was a decent end. However, just as the baboon prepared to close its eyes and await the arrival of death, it suddenly heard a strange sound coming from nearby. It was a sound like electricity flowing through, yet also like flesh and blood cheering. The baboon struggled to turn its head. Immediately following, it witnessed a scene that shattered its monk-alive worldview. The human, who clearly suffered a heavier injury and should have died instantly, was enveloped by a bizarre magical energy fluctuation carrying a faint red glow. Cough, cough. That hurts. Lowy spat out blood while forcing out a sentence between his teeth. Although I really want to say this was a fair duel, I regret to inform you. Reverse cursed technique, full activation. Buzz. The massive 4,710 points of magic power inside Lowy were being drawn out frantically at this moment. Negative cursed energy collided and rubbed against itself in an instant, generating positive energy. That was the energy of life. Under the baboon's terrified gaze, the horrific penetrating wound on Loi's chest began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Granulation tissue wriggled, bones reorganized, skin regenerated. In just over 10 seconds, Loi stood up slowly from the ground as if he were perfectly fine. He dusted off his clothes, stretched his completely intact shoulder, and even let out a long yawn. Sorry, I won, monkey. Loi picked up the long sword that had fallen to the ground and looked down at the baboon lying there, now unable to move due to excessive blood loss. Baboon. If there were a translator, it would definitely be cursing him in its mind right now. What the hell am I supposed to fight against this? You're cheating. You're using an invincibility hack. I refuse to accept this. Loi paid no mind to the accusation in the baboon's eyes. This was a survival game, not a sporting competition. As a sparring partner, you were qualified. As a reward, I will grant you a quick end. Loi gripped the sword with both hands, his gaze calm. Hand raised, blade fell. Thwack! The baboon's head rolled to the side, the unwillingness in its eyes gradually fading. System notification, killed elite unit, swordsman baboon. Loi ignored the system prompt, he just shook the blood off his sword. Who? With the reverse cursed technique, as long as my head isn't instantly chopped off, I can keep surviving. This feeling of as long as I have enough magic power, I won't die was truly exhilarating. Having eliminated the obstacle, Loi's confidence soared. Since I can even solo the elite monster here, it means I now possess the qualifications to explore this island. He looked up toward the depths of the forest. It was deeper there, the mist thicker, but that also meant greater opportunities. Next up, I need to find Hawkeye and become his disciple. Loi carried his sword and strode confidently into the depths of the forest. However, as the saying goes, coolness lasts less than 3 seconds. 10 minutes later, Loi stood in an open area, his expression shifting from confidence to rigidity, and finally to despair. Around him, 3 layers deep, outer 3 layers deep. There were over 20 baboons of various sizes surrounding him. Some held long knives, some held axes, and there were even some holding firearms. They looked at Loi, who had trespassed into their territory, their teeth bared excitedly, just like a little lamb that had wandered into a wolf pack. The baboon that Loi had gone to great lengths to solo just now was probably only a squad leader level character among this group. Loi swallowed, raised one hand, and flashed an awkward smile. If I said I came here to deliver bananas, would you believe me? All the baboons who squeak. Believe you? Hell we would. The next second, the glint of blades and shadows overwhelmed Loi like a tsunami. This time, he didn't even have time to activate the reverse cursed technique. Loi only felt his vision go black, and the entire world became quiet. System notification, you have died. System notification, remaining exploration attempts for today, 1 or 3. Chapter 47, Attribute Skyrocket. The sea breeze blew. Loi sat on the familiar gravel beach, his face once again blank with shock. I was too careless. Loi covered his face, letting out a painful groan. What good is being unrivaled in one-on-one combat? They fight in groups. How is this a Souls-like game? This is clearly a Dynasty Warriors style hack and slash. Except I'm the grass being mowed. After dying twice, Loi finally faced reality completely. In this Baboon Island instance, relying on brute force would absolutely not work if he wanted to meet the final boss, Hawkeye Mihawk. Every single baboon here possessed the skill level of an elite human swordsman, and they were extremely united, constantly calling for backup. My goal is to become stronger, to become Hawkeye's disciple. To achieve this goal, I must first be able to walk to the castle gate alive. In other words, map exploration. Loi took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. Although he had died twice, these deaths were not entirely without value. The first time made him recognize the gap in individual combat strength. The second time made him understand the terror of group aggro. And Loei's thought stirred, and he opened his status panel. Since this was a training instance, the improvement gained from combat should be the most direct. Player, Loei. Race, human. Age, 18. Stamina, 75/30. Strength, 84/41. Speed, 79/32. Spirit, 43/2. Magic, 49/10/200. Primogems, 14/40. Active skills, skill, touch of absorption. Passive skills, super luck. Looking at his skyrocketing stats, the smile on Loei's lips could not be suppressed. With this rate of improvement, he believed it wouldn't take long before he could stand before Hawkeye. Loei stood up and brushed the dust off his backside. He walked to the nearby sword mound and, this time, carefully selected a Japanese katana that looked sharper and felt better balanced in his hand. Clang! The long blade was drawn, its cold light piercingly sharp. Loei looked at the misty forest ahead, a smile reappearing on his lips. It was the smile of a hunter. I have one last chance. This time, I will cut down every single one of those monkeys. Carrying his boosted stats and newfound confidence, Loei held his sword and stepped into the dangerous forest for the third time. His back was resolute, his killing intent blazing. A storm of blood and gore. This was the only feeling Loei had at the moment. The katana in his hand was already chipped, and every swing required more strength than the last. Around him, layers upon layers of baboons rushed forward like a tide. Screech! Accompanied by a sharp roar, a burly baboon wielding a giant axe leaped high into the air. The heavy axe, carrying the momentum to split mountains and crack stones, hurtled directly toward Loei's crown. Damn it! Loei gritted his teeth, but his footwork remained steady. If this were the him from his first attempt in the instance, facing such an encirclement, he would have been too terrified to move. But now, fourth one down. Loei did not retreat. Instead, using his front foot as a pivot, his body spun like a top, narrowly avoiding the heavy axe strike. Simultaneously, the chipped katana in his hand used the centrifugal force of the spin to slice viciously into the giant axe baboon's waist and ribs. Slash! Blood splattered, the warm liquid belonging to the enemy. But this did not deter the frenzied imitators, the smell of blood instead ignited their more primal ferocity. More swords, spears, and even morning stars seemingly scavenged from somewhere else enveloped him from all directions without a blind spot. Even a hero cannot fight off a horde of monkeys. Even though Loei possessed reverse cursed technique, and even though his stats had skyrocketed, facing this dishonorable group brawl, the rate of magic consumption far outpaced the rate of recovery. 10 minutes later, when Loei exerted all his strength to chop off the head of the fifth baboon, a short blade pierced his abdomen, immediately followed by two long swords pressing against his neck. His vision gradually turned red with blood. In the second before his consciousness faded, Loei had only one thought. Next time, I will be the one who wins. Who? Loei bolted upright in bed, gasping for fresh air. There was no salty smell of the sea breeze, nor the nauseating stench of blood, only the faint scent of lavender aromatherapy in the room. That was the smell of the real world. Loei instinctively touched his stomach and neck, confirming they were intact, before collapsing heavily back onto the soft bedding. 3 chances, and they're all gone now. He looked out the window. It was already dusk. The fiery clouds on the horizon painted the entire city in orange-red hues. The originally azure sky had turned dim and ambiguous, with a few birds occasionally streaking by on their way home. The sense of abrupt transition from the life-and-death battlefield back to mundane routine made Loei momentarily dazed. He lay there for a while until his heart rate settled, then opened his panel again. Instance challenge ended. Player, Loei. Stamina, 82/7. Strength, 91/7. Speed, 85/6. Spirit, 45/2. Magic, 50/100/190. Strength finally broke the 90 mark. Lowy clenched his fist, feeling the seemingly endless explosive power within his body. Although he was ultimately hacked to death, the tangible feeling of being able to cleave bone could not be faked. It's about time to go pick someone up. Lowy glanced at the wall clock. It was getting late. He reached for his phone on the bedside table and skillfully dialed the number pinned to the top. Ring, ring, ring. After 3 rings, the call was answered. Even through the receiver, Lowy could hear the noisy crowd in the background, along with the sound of someone chewing food. Hello? Master. Artoria's voice came through. Although still crisp and serious, it sounded somewhat muffled because her mouth was full. Is there any urgent military intelligence? Lowy helplessly held his forehead. No military intelligence. I just wanted to ask where you are. It's getting dark, I'll come pick you up. I'm at the commercial street near the school. Artoria swallowed the food in her mouth, and her voice became clearer. There's a supply point here called Family Restaurant. Although it's named Family, it offers large portions at affordable prices. Classmate Hachimi strongly recommended it. I can imagine. Lowy smiled. Wait for me there. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Understood. I will hold the fort here. After hanging up, Lowy quickly washed his face, changed into a casual hoodie, grabbed his car keys, and left the house. P.S. Adding updates, not all at once. 3 chapters for a while. Chapter 48, The Attitude Towards the New King Arthur. Half an hour later. Lowy's black Maybach slowly stopped on the roadside near the Family Restaurant. Through the car window, he immediately spotted the small figure standing under the street lamp. Artoria was wearing the black uniform of Shuqing Academy. Her golden hair shone brilliantly in the lingering rays of the setting sun, and the iconic ahoge on her head gently swayed in the breeze. She was still holding 2 bulging paper bags, clearly containing her spoils of war. Master. Seeing Lowy's car, Artoria's pair of emerald green eyes lit up. She quickly walked over, pulled open the door, and settled into the passenger seat. Sorry to keep you waiting. Lowy started the car and merged into the evening rush hour traffic. Not at all. I just finished the last of the after-meal dessert. Artoria fastened her seatbelt and patted her perfectly flat stomach with a look of deep satisfaction. The interior of the car fell silent. Only soothing jazz music played from the car radio. Lowy gripped the steering wheel, his gaze fixed on the endless stream of red taillights ahead, but his thoughts involuntarily drifted back to the previous dungeon. The feeling of death was not pleasant. That sensation of coldness, darkness, and powerlessness was a massive mental burden, even for him who possessed a system. But it was precisely because of this burden that when he looked at Artoria beside him now, an unusual emotion welled up in his heart. He turned his head and glanced at the girl who was staring blankly at the neon lights outside the car window. Her profile was exquisitely beautiful, her eyes clear and resolute. Who would have thought that such a seemingly delicate girl once bore the rise and fall of all of Britain? She was King Arthur. The perfect king. A tragic hero who sacrificed all her youth and emotions for her nation. In her original timeline, even at the very end, she blamed herself for failing to save her country and even wished to use the Holy Grail to erase the history of her becoming king. If it were the old me, I probably could only watch from outside the screen as a reader, lamenting your fate. Lowy murmured to himself. But now it was different. He was a player. He was a player in an invincible power fantasy novel. So, could he change the destined destruction of Britain? Since he could repeat even those certain death dungeons over and over, since he could even grind up those unreasonable stats. Then, could this thing called a destiny also be trampled under his feet? The destruction of Britain. The fingers gripping the steering wheel tightened slightly. If Artoria's wish was to save that long-vanished kingdom, then as her master, as her only bond in this world. I can bear it too. Loi's gaze gradually sharpened. This wasn't just for Artoria, it was also to satisfy his ambition as a conqueror. That sense of accomplishment from turning a tragedy into a happy ending, that was the ultimate romance for a player. Leah. Loi suddenly spoke, breaking the silence in the car. HM? Master. Artoria turned her head, looking at him doubtfully. Is there an enemy attack? No. Loi looked at the road ahead, a faint smile curving his lips, but his tone was more serious than ever. From now on, properly enjoy your current life. Eat whatever you want to eat, go wherever you want to go, make whatever friends you want to make. You don't always have to be tense, and you don't need to constantly think about battle and responsibility. Artoria froze. She tilted her head, and the ahoj on her head bent into the shape of a question mark. Her emerald eyes were filled with confusion. For a king who strictly adhered to the code of chivalry, the word enjoyment felt somewhat foreign, even luxurious. Master, is this an order? She asked hesitantly. If it's to accumulate magical energy, eating is indeed necessary, but leisure. It's not an order, it's a suggestion. Loi reached out a hand and gently stroked the top of her golden hair. The texture was unexpectedly nice. As for those heavy things, those thorns that need to be cut down with a sword, just leave them to me. Although he hadn't yet found a way to return to that era, and the system hadn't issued a relevant quest yet. Loi believed that day would eventually come, which was evident from Artoria's exclusive quest. And before that day, he hoped this King Arthur could first learn how to be an ordinary, happy girl. Although I don't quite understand. Artoria felt the warmth coming from the top of her head, and a slight blush crept onto her cheeks, but she didn't pull away. She looked into Loi's firm black eyes, the eyes of a leader she had seen on the battlefield. So, she nodded. But I trust Master's judgment. Since Master says so, I will try my best to enjoy it. That's the spirit. Loi withdrew his hand, pressed the accelerator, and the car sped into the night on the way back. Some things didn't need to be said too clearly. For a man, shouldering something silently and then showing off his trump card coolly at the crucial moment, that was true style. The next morning. Shachiing Academy, Class 2B. The initially slightly noisy morning reading session instantly fell silent as the classroom door was opened. This wasn't the silence brought by the head teacher Hiratsuka Shizuka's forceful suppression, but rather a collective speechlessness caused by extreme shock. On the podium, Loi was wearing a well-tailored, dark blue casual suit with a white shirt underneath. The collar was slightly open and he wasn't wearing a tie, giving him a look that was both formal and casual. His body proportions, enhanced by the system, were as perfect as a window display model, broad shoulders, narrow waist, long legs, coupled with a face that was already handsome and now radiated brilliance due to his confidence, making him extremely charismatic. Sunlight streamed through the window and fell upon him, as if coating his entire body in a golden edge. Ahoom! Loi picked up a piece of chalk and turned to write two strong, powerful characters on the blackboard, Loi. The sound of the chalk breaking startled the students who were in a daze. Loi turned around, placed both hands on the lectern, and swept his gaze across the room. His eyes did not linger on the blushing girls but passed over the crowd, landing precisely on Artoria, who was sitting in her window seat with a proper posture. Seeing her master truly standing on the podium, a flicker of surprise crossed Artoria's eyes, but she quickly regained her composure and even gave Loi a dignified nod. Loi withdrew his gaze, a smile that felt like a spring breeze playing on his lips, and began to speak. Nice to meet you all, classmates. Due to some special circumstances, starting today, I will be serving as your psychological counseling teacher. You can call me Teacher Loi, or Mr. Loi. After a brief moment of dead silence. Boom! The entire classroom seemed to explode, erupting in screams loud enough to shake the roof. P.S. Artoria, Master, why did you change your mind? Loi, because I have experienced pain. Artoria, master, you. Loey, being cut down really doesn't feel good. Chapter 49, Swimsuits, Return, Proposal. So cool. Is this some kind of idle drama unfolding? Really? The psychology teacher? I have a heart condition. Teacher, my heart is racing right now, I can't take it. Those legs. That waist. That face. I'm going to die. Teacher, do you have a girlfriend? Do you mind a teacher-student romance? Facing the group of girls below who looked like hungry wolves pouncing on their prey, and the boys' gazes filled with envy, jealousy, and hatred, the smile on Loey's face remained unchanged. But his heart was completely undisturbed, he almost wanted to laugh. HMPH, mortals. What you value is just my appearance. As for me, I only care if my king has eaten breakfast. Loey raised his hand and made a downward gesture. Miraculously, that gesture seemed to carry some kind of magic, and the boiling classroom actually quieted down within seconds. I have felt everyone's enthusiasm. Loey said with a smile, his tone gentle yet carrying an unquestionable sense of control. However, this is class time. Although I am the psychology teacher, I do not accept consultations here for heart palpitations caused by the teacher being too handsome. Ha 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 ha. The classroom erupted in a burst of good-natured laughter. The atmosphere instantly became relaxed and lively. Watching the man on the podium who was chatting and laughing, instantly taking control of the entire room's rhythm, Yukinoshita Yukinon, sitting in the corner, frowned slightly. This man. She closed the paperback in her hand, her expression somewhat complicated. He really isn't just an ordinary spirit exorcist, is he? This kind of social control is truly troublesome. Artoria, sitting in front of Yukinoshita, looked at Loey on the podium, the corners of her mouth involuntarily rising slightly. Although she didn't know why her master had come to her class. But the way he stood in the light was indeed quite pleasing. The club activity time in the afternoon always carried an air called languor. The afterglow of the setting sun streamed through the window into the service club's activity room, dyeing the dust in the air gold. Yukinoshita Yukinon was elegantly holding a cup of black tea. Flipping through the paperback in her hands, Artoria was seriously attacking a large box of high-grade Japanese sweets in front of her. Yanaomi Anna was sprawled on the desk, listlessly counting her fingers, still chewing on a pocky stick she must have gotten from somewhere. As for Hashiman Hikigaya, the boy with dead fish eyes was radiating a strong aura of I don't want to be here, shrinking in the corner and pretending to be air. Loey sat in the advisor-teacher's exclusive seat, lightly tapping his fingers on the desk. Although the current days were comfortable, as an original resident of the 2D world who deeply understood plot tropes, he knew one thing. If he didn't actively stir up trouble, the plot would only develop horizontally, like Yanaomi Anna's weight, without any ripples. Ahoom! Loey cleared his throat, breaking the silence in the room. Everyone's gaze converged. Everyone, I have thought of a very serious problem. Loey interlaced his hands under his chin, adopting the posture of a commander contemplating world peace. Summer has arrived, and since the establishment of our service club, we haven't had a single proper training camp. Therefore, I propose, this weekend, let's go to the seaside. That's right. It's the legendary swimsuit chapter. When saying the last three words, Loey's voice was sonorous and powerful, as if proclaiming a sacred doctrine. Silence. After a brief silence. I refuse. A crisp voice came from the corner. Hashiman Hikigaya pushed up his non-existent glasses and said coldly, I have a date this weekend. Loey raised an eyebrow. Hashiman Hikigaya, you're not going to say you're staying home to play video games, are you? That reason is rejected. No. The corner of Hashiman Hikigaya's mouth curved slightly upward, revealing a genuine life smile that made all the single people present want to burn him to death. I'm going on a date with Ayaka. We're going shopping at the mall in Chiba. Ayaka said she wants to buy a new tennis racket and asked me to help advise her. The air instantly solidified. TSK. Naomi Anna let out an extremely loud click of her tongue, biting her pocky stick with a crack. It's actually true. This guy with rotten eyes is actually living a genuine life. This world must be broken. Lowy also covered his forehead. He underestimated things. He forgot that this world had a strange, heavily modified setting where the pairing of Hachiman Hikigaya and Totsuka Ayaka was already recognized as the pure love war gods in this timeline. Fine, since it's to accompany your girlfriend, I'll generously approve your leave slip. Lowy waved his hand and said with disgust, hurry up and go. The sour smell on you is affecting the club's air quality. Hachiman Hikigaya shrugged, picked up his school bag without hesitation, leaving behind a dashing figure, as if saying, not only do I not have to go to the team building, but I also get to go on a date, which is great. After sending off the only person living a genuine life, Lowy looked at the remaining girls. Well, how about the rest of you? You shouldn't have any objections, right? I have a question. Naomi Anna raised her hand and asked very seriously, if we go to the seaside, will there be seafood barbecue? Will the teacher treat us? Can we eat until we're full? There will be, I'm treating, and you can eat until you're full. Yay! I'll go. Naomi Anna instantly revived, her eyes shining, I want to eat grilled prawns. And Wagyu beef. Yukinoshita Yukino sighed and closed the book in her hand, although I'm not very interested in this kind of group activity, since it's a club activity, and the teacher already said so. To prevent certain people from drowning because they ate too much at the beach, I suppose I should go watch over things. This was a Tsundere-style agreement. As for Artoria, the seaside? She swallowed the Japanese sweet in her mouth, and a hint of expectation flashed in her emerald eyes. It's been a long time since I've seen the ocean. Besides, I heard the grilled squid at the seaside tastes very good. Very good, unanimously approved. After confirming the weekend itinerary, everyone returned to their previous state of free activity. Lowy leaned back in his chair, seemingly resting with his eyes closed, but in reality, he was checking his system panel. Primogem, 1710. The suffering endured on Baboon Island before was painful, but it did accumulate some savings. Coupled with the reward for completing the mission bring the students back, he was now slightly better off financially. Since we're going to the seaside, we can't go unprepared. Lowy turned his gaze to the gacha interface flashing with an alluring light. The current UP banner was, Konosuba, God's blessing on this wonderful world. Lowy didn't hesitate and directly clicked the 10 consecutive draws button. The next second, a burst of brilliant light exploded across Lowy's retina. Blue, 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 purple, blue. Suddenly, a dazzling golden light pierced through the blue-purple ocean. Gold legendary. P.S. Seeking reviews, seeking updates, seeking bookmarks. Chapter 50, Aqua's Spirit Core. The light dispersed, and 10 items lay quietly in the inventory. Besides a pile of junk like cabbage, ordinary soap, and useless rags, 3 items emitted a special glow. Skill book, Explosion Magic, purple. Item, Hero's Holy Sword, fake, blue. And the most dazzling golden item. Special item, Goddess's Spirit Core times Aqua, gold. Looking at the water blue orb floating in the inventory, emitting a sacred yet strangely idiotic aura, Lowy fell into deep thought. Aqua's Spirit Core. If he fused with this, he could obtain all the divine authorities of that goddess of water. This included, but was not limited to, nearly infinite magic power, absolute purification ability against the undead and demons, and supreme water magic, as well as banquet skills. Sounds powerful, right? It is indeed god-tier power. However, Lowy was very clear that power came with a price. Aqua's price was extremely low luck, and low intelligence. If I use this, will my super luck passive be completely cancelled out? Will I turn into an idiotic goddess of water who only knows how to do hand gestures? Lowy shuddered. Absolutely not. But this is god-tier power, throwing it away would be too wasteful. Lowy's gaze swept across the activity room. Finally, it settled on the trembling figure in the corner. Yotsuya Miko. At this moment, Miko was holding an English book to cover her face because she noticed a transparent ghost, resembling a slug, clinging behind Yukino Shita. Although it was only a low-level ghost, the visual pollution still made her feel physically uncomfortable. I have an idea. A kindly sinister smile curled the corner of Loe's mouth. What was Aqua's specialty? Purifying the undead, saving malevolent spirits, having absolute destructive power against all things foul. Wasn't this exactly what Yotsuya Miko needed most? It was a match made in heaven. As for the drop in IQ, Miko wasn't the type to fight based on intelligence anyway. As long as she could survive, being a little dumb shouldn't matter, right? Classmate Yotsuya. Loe stood up and beckoned to Miko in the corner. Come out with me for a moment. I need to discuss something about your physique privately. Upon hearing the words physique, Yotsuya Miko flinched. She immediately put down the book and trotted out like an obedient puppy. An empty classroom at the end of the corridor. Loe closed the door and turned to face the nervous Yotsuya Miko. Teacher, is there something behind me again? Yotsuya Miko asked with a tearful voice. No, not only is there nothing, but I also have a gift for you. Loe extended his hand. In his palm, the water-blue orb slowly materialized, emitting a soft and sacred glow, and one could even hear the sound of flowing water echoing. This is... Yotsuya Miko's eyes widened. She could feel every cell in her body yearning for this orb. It was an instinctual pursuit of security. This is the power of the goddess of water. Loe spoke nonsense with a straight face. Once you possess this, you will no longer be a victim who can only pretend not to see. You will become the bane of malevolent spirits. All foul things will vanish the moment they touch you. How about it? Do you want it? Yotsuya Miko nodded desperately, tears almost streaming down. I want it. Teacher. I want it. Only those who have experienced that desperate fear understand how precious power it is. Very good. Loe wasted no time and directly slapped the orb in his hand towards Miko's chest. Catch! This is the guaranteed big prize from this period's gacha banner. Slap! The orb merged into the girl's body. There was no earth-shattering explosion, nor was there a painful transformation process. Yotsuya Miko only felt a warm, cool, sweet power, like a mountain spring, instantly flow through her entire body. The tension in her nerves, caused by long-term fear, instantly relaxed. Her vision changed. The previously gloomy and terrifying corners now looked utterly ordinary to her. She could even feel the water molecules floating in the air cheering for her, as if she were their queen. I feel like I can do anything. Yotsuya Miko looked at her hands, somewhat stunned. In fact, a lot of strange knowledge suddenly appeared in her mind. For example, how to spray colored water splashes with a fan, how to use super powerful offensive magic, and also, purifying the undead. Alright, just feel it for a bit. Loe interrupted her self-intoxication, warning her with a serious expression, I have given you the power, but I must warn you about a few things. First, never casually use the water authorities at maximum power. Although you are the goddess's agent, if this power gets out of control, do you want to turn all of Tokyo into Venice? Second, in the future, when you see malevolent spirits, don't look at them with that trash expression. Although they are indeed trash, you must keep a low profile, understand? Yotsuya Miko quickly nodded, her eyes filled with adoration for Loe. I understand. Thank you, teacher. Thank you so much. She was so excited she wanted to bow, perhaps even kowtow to Loe. This was a life-saving grace. However, just as she was about to express her gratitude, slap! A stack of thick documents was slapped onto the desk in front of her. It made a dull thud. Yotsuya Miko froze, looking up at Loe in confusion. Loe's expression instantly switched from sacred mentor to the black-hearted capitalist. He pushed up his non-existent glasses, revealing his white teeth. No need for thanks. Here, sign this. This is. Yotsuya Miko picked up the stack of documents, which were densely covered with clauses. Agreement regarding Ms. Yotsuya Miko voluntarily becoming Mr. Lowe's exclusive subordinate. Confidentiality clauses regarding the fake, magical girl. Obligation to respond to summons at any time and place. Regarding. What else? Lowe spread his hands as a matter of course. Did you think God-tier power was free? I gave you such a huge benefit, allowing you to leap from the bottom of the food chain to the top. Shouldn't you pay a small price? I didn't give you power just so you could have fun alone. Starting today, you are my, to avoid misunderstanding, let's just say you are my special assistant. In the future, whenever you encounter troublesome supernatural incidents or need to perform talents, you must be available upon call. This was Lowe's calculation. Aqua's power was indeed useful, especially for dealing with those ghostly things. But he didn't want to bear the side effects. Now, by giving the power to Miko, he had created a powerful stand user. In the future, when encountering a malevolent spirit dungeon, he could just close the door and release Miko. He enjoyed the convenience while avoiding the risk, a perfect win-win, confirmed. P.S. The author experienced a wonderful battle of wits. Someone gave the author a 2-star review, claiming the protagonist donated money to the Japanese people. However, the protagonist's donations went to Hope Primary Schools and rural construction projects, which are poverty alleviation programs only found here. In other words, that person completely failed to realize what they were saying, suppressing a laugh P.S.2, as for why he donated? It was ill-gotten gains to begin with. The protagonist isn't short of money, after all, he has channels to acquire funds, and this also relates to the plot involving Toyokawa Xiangzi. Toyokawa Xiangzi, the swindler gentleman, is too mean, ripping off stockings. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Sally Fox audiobook.